T. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Well, there's a reason it's called school term, and that is all those little kids should be at school, not elsewhere. Now, I know a lot of people find that difficult to comprehend because they're thinking, well, that doesn't suit me and it's cheaper to go then and whatever it is. But in my whole life, my parents would never have said, take 2 weeks off school or take a week off school. No. So I find this very, very hard to... It just shouldn't be part of the equation. You're at school. You're not on holiday.
Well, lots of parents would say, wouldn't they? They can't afford to take their children in half-term because the flights have tripled.
Totally agree, but we couldn't afford it. So what did we do? We went to the local beaches in Ireland. That's where we went. So that's how you had your holiday. So you just forego
a foreign holiday?
Hold on, so the prices go... But the prices are going up. They make them more expensive...
During the
summer holidays.
So
they take them out of school. So you get parents that will take them out of school during school term because the prices are so expensive during summer holidays, which makes it unfair.
We're not stupid. We understand that. But the law says you have to be at school.
Right, I agree with that. But don't you think it's disgusting that the price is so much more expensive, and that's the reason people are considering it?
It's not really relevant, is what I'm saying, because the rules say you're not available for these holidays, so you're at school.
Right.
But the companies shouldn't be doing that, should they?
Look...
I don't think they should. I don't think they should be allowed to.
I agree. I think
the only rule that comes first is that is school term. School term means that's what the law requires you to do. Be at school, not be on a beach in Ibiza.
But the temptation is there if it's so much cheaper and you couldn't afford to go during the summer holidays. I've never done that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, 53 British nationals are feared dead after an Air India flight bound for London Gatwick crashed shortly after takeoff. The Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner was engulfed in a huge fireball after plummeting into a building in the suburb of Ahmedabad in western India. Local police have said over 200 bodies have now been recovered from the site and have said that there are now 2 survivors. And throughout the show, we'll bring you all the latest on this huge breaking news story. But first, let's get your headlines, and here's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. In other stories today, 3 teenagers have been charged with riot offences following a third night of disorder in Northern Ireland. The disorder largely took place in Ballymena, but violence has spread to other towns, including Larne, where a leisure centre providing emergency shelter for relocated families was attacked and set on fire. Authorities have described it as racist thuggery targeted at ethnic minorities and police officers. One man is clearly seen throwing a machete towards security services. 32 police officers were injured and 6 people arrested on the first 2 nights of violence. Deputy First Minister Emma Little-Pendley says the government is working to reassure the local community.
No woman or girl walking about should feel fearful. We've got our Ending Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, and of course we've got a number of schemes running. We're working with the PSNI, we're working with local councils to tackle the scourge of that misogyny, of that violence against women and girls. So we want to reassure everyone that we are working hard to try to ensure that everybody remains safe. But we are listening to those concerns. We must listen to those concerns, and we need to stamp out that violence against women and girls.
The Chancellor says she's disappointed after new figures show the UK economy shrank by 0.3% in April. The sharper-than-expected decline comes a day after Rachel Reeves promised to boost growth in her spending review. Her plans included an extra £29 billion a year for the NHS in England and boosts for defence, education and housing, although some departments will see their budget squeezed. Economists say tax rises will be almost inevitable in the autumn. Rachel Reeves, though, has defended her announcements.
have to get the balance right between tax, spending and borrowing. If you said yes to every request for more money, you'd end up in the same position that Liz Truss ended up in, which is crashing the economy, sending mortgage rates spiralling and causing the cost of living crisis that's done so much damage.
Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride has accused Ms Reeves of economic vandalism, saying taxpayers will foot the bill.
The answer is it's coming by way of far higher taxes, particularly on businesses, and that is destroying growth. It has also come by way of huge levels of additional borrowing, which has been inflationary, which has been interest rates have been higher for longer, our national debt growing, and the servicing costs of that debt, because of the higher interest rates, now running at £100 billion per year. That's twice what we spend on defence, and that's leaving us overall in a very fragile position with a lot of challenges ahead, and a lot of people worried now that we're going to be looking at potentially very significant further tax rises in the autumn.
Elsewhere, the US is scaling back its embassy staff in Iraq, as well as from military bases in the region over heightened security threats. It comes over fears of reprisals amid reports that Israel is preparing to attack Iran's nuclear programme without US support. Diplomatic staff will leave Baghdad, along with a partial withdrawal of staff from bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. It's been announced by US President Donald Trump, who said he was less confident now that negotiations with Iran would succeed. A curfew has been in place for a second night in Los Angeles amid hundreds of arrests as protests against Donald Trump immigration raids continue. The sixth day of demonstrations have been largely peaceful, but there have been sporadic outbreaks of violence. Nearly 400 people have been arrested in LA since protests began on Friday. The governor of California says President Trump has escalated tensions with an unnecessary and illegal deployment of federal troops. Elsewhere, the White House is reviewing a multi-billion-dollar submarine deal signed with the UK and Australia. Washington want to make sure it's aligned with President Trump's America First agenda. The AUKUS Pact would provide Australia with its first nuclear submarines and has been widely seen as a response to the threat of China. Australia's Defence Minister says he's as confident the pact will proceed. And one of the world's most active volcanoes is erupting again. Kilauea on Hawaii's Big Island has been spewing fountains of lava more than 330 feet in the air. It's the latest event in an eruption which started almost 6 months ago. Scientists with the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory say the fountains could climb even higher as the activity intensifies. Those are the latest headlines for now. More from me at 3:30.
Thank you, Tatiana. 53 British nationals are now feared dead after an Air India flight bound for London Gatwick crashed shortly after takeoff. The Boeing 7878 Dreamliner was engulfed in a huge fireball after plummeting into a building in the suburb of Ahmedabad in Western India. Local police have now said that over 200 bodies have been recovered from the site, and there are even speculation, perhaps a miracle, of 2 survivors. We can now speak with GBNews' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, a tragedy is almost impossible to comprehend. You've been covering this throughout the morning thus far. The reports initially are no survivors, and now, could there be a miracle in Ahmedabad? 2 survivors, all the confusion there on the ground. This is the plane that's gone into a residential block. Could they be bodies from inside that block? What's the latest situation, Mark?
Well, we'd heard about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago, Martin, some very ominous news from the police commissioner in Ahmedabad, who said that all indications were that there were no survivors from on board the 787 Dreamliner aircraft that was bound for Gatwick Airport when it went down. But now these reports coming through, it's reported by the ANI news agency, reputable news agency in India, and they've said in a news flash, indications that a survivor has been found at the crash site. Also, that a second survivor may have been found in the hospital. Now, that wouldn't be unusual because, of course, you've got chaotic scenes with many people injured on the ground there and people caught up and killed, both in the air and on the ground. So in that confused scenario, you can see how basically the emergency services, the ambulances there, are just scooping up the injured and taking them straight off for treatment. But clearly, they've got word from the hospital that they believe that one of the injured that they're treating is a survivor from the aircraft. We can only hope that that is true. It will be something that the families, including, of course, the families of the 53 British nationals on board this aircraft, will be clinging to any sign that there could be survivors, despite the rather pessimistic view of the police commissioner a little earlier, Martin.
And Mark White, of course, the relatives, particularly in the United Kingdom, waiting at Gatwick for those 53 on board. This will be that scintilla of hope, the atom of optimism that there could be this miracle. What do we know about what went wrong? Obviously, we can't speculate too much, but it seems to be that's very shortly after takeoff. This aircraft was only airbound for around about 60 seconds. A lot of people have been looking at the videos, a lot of aviation experts. The consensus seems to be pointing towards the fact this craft couldn't get enough upward momentum to stay in the air. Is that perhaps something to do with the flaps, the uplift on the wings? What do we know in that circumstance?
Well, clearly that a number of people that have seen the images, the video, that very shocking video of the final moments of this 787 as it desperately tries to get height but just continues to plummet from the skies. And interestingly, its sort of nose is pointing in an upward direction, illustrative, I think, of pilots fighting with the controls to push the aircraft into a position where it can get more air over the wings, can extend the glide effectively so they can stay airborne as long as possible. We should say that we want to bring you those images of the final moments of that aircraft as it crashes. A warning to viewers, though, that these are distressing images, as these are the final seconds. You can see the aircraft there, and at that final moment, the pilots just pushing the nose up, and then just seconds later, that fireball erupting from the scene. Very disturbing images as we realise, of course, about the terrible loss of life that has resulted from that, both on the aircraft itself and on the ground as well. Now, as you said there, Martin, there are a number of people who viewed the videos, and it suggests to them that the flaps were not fully extended. Now, the flaps, of course, are used on an aircraft when it's coming in to landing, to extend downwards, to catch the air, to slow the aircraft down and slow the momentum of that aircraft down before it lands. But they're also used, the flats get extended out across the wing to have a wider wing to catch as much air as possible to help push that aircraft up into the sky. So some have indicated that it doesn't look like the flaps were fully extended. Also, of course, you have the wheels that were still down, the undercarriage of those wheels were still down at that point. And what normally happens after an aircraft takes off, because there's so much drag from these huge, big, massive wheel carriages under an aircraft, that within 10 to 15 seconds of takeoff, they are then retracted into the body of the aircraft, giving it more of an aerodynamic movement then, and an ability with the flaps extended and the power of the engines to push up to a higher altitude, to that cruising altitude. But clearly, if you've got the landing gear down, either they've suddenly tried to deploy the landing gear again, expecting that they might have to make an emergency landing, or they haven't been able to bring it up in the first place. And if you've got the combination of the landing gear down, the flaps not extended, then many people that know a lot more about this than me are suggesting that clearly that would mean that, you know, there is an inevitable catastrophic event then, because you're just unable to try and lift what is a fully laden aircraft full of passengers, all of their belongings, and of course many tons of fuel as well for that long-haul flight down to Gatwick Airport. It was due to land at Gatwick Airport just before 6:30 this evening.
Yeah, and just 60 seconds into what would have been a 10-hour flight, of course, carrying a maximum payload of aviation fuel, and that firebomb there was the result. Mark White, thank you very much. Of course, cross back to you later throughout the show as more details emerge. We can now speak with a former Boeing 747 pilot and an aviation consultant, and that's Alistair Rosenshine. Alistair, welcome to the show. You'd have been watching all of this, of course, with a close eye. You're a hugely experienced pilot yourself, aviation consultant. Had the benefit of having looked at all the video evidence, the evidence that we have available, what's your most likely conclusion of what went wrong?
Well, a lot of it's already been mentioned, and, you know, it's unusual, it's extremely unusual to still have the gear down, and it does look like the flaps weren't deployed. But, you know, it's not terribly clear in the video. You can definitely see the gears down. So what operates the gear, what operates the flaps? So it looks like it could have been a hydraulic problem, which would explain part of that. But it could also be engine problems. It seems to be that the aircraft wasn't developing enough lift to climb, because the attitude of the aircraft, the nose up, would normally help the aircraft climb up away from the ground. But the attitude is a little bit flat. It doesn't have the normal nose up attitude that you'd expect in a flight. So it is possible that the pilots have recognised they're underpowered and therefore haven't raised the nose anymore, because had they done so, the aircraft would have stalled. So it seems to have been more or less a controlled flight down into the ground. It's puzzling. I can't think of a similar accident like this, but it is definitely, I would say, high on the list would be some sort of technical failure in the aircraft.
And Alistair, that brings us then on to two key aspects. That's the safety record of this particular type of Boeing and also of the pilots. Now, as we understand, the pilots are both very, very experienced, more than 9,000 flying hours between them, seem to have an impeccable flying record, which then brings us on to the physical aspect of the Boeing 787. Now, it has to be pointed out, it has an impeccable safety record, but of course, it's a recent addition to the Boeing stable, as it were, because they have had a lot of technical issues before with previous models. Alistair. OK, just waiting to get Alistair Rosenshine back. Just pointing, we have live pictures there. This is of what is that crash site in Ahmedabad, of course, a very densely populated area, just short while away from the end of the runway. Again, just to repeat, this aircraft in the air for less than 60 seconds. Everyone seems to be indicated now the flaps were not deployed, the landing gear wasn't withdrawn. And as Alistair Rosenshine was saying there, this both points to some kind of perhaps mechanical or hydraulic failure, the inability to correctly deploy the uplift and to get the landing gear up to reduce drag, and the nose of that plane appears to be trying. The pilot seems to be trying to get that aircraft back in the air. Let's get back to Alistair Rosenshine now. I believe we have him back. Alistair, I just mentioned 2 points there. The first one being the pilots themselves seem to have more than 9,000 flying hours between them, an impeccable record. The Boeing 787 itself, a relatively new addition, of course, to the Boeing stable, an impeccable safety record to date, but Boeing has had its controversy in the past with safety issues.
Well, it has, but this particular model of aircraft has, as you quite rightly say, a good safety record. Something's gone wrong, obviously. it is, it is pointing towards some sort of technical issue. You mentioned that the pilots have 9,000 hours between them. In fact, that's the actual numbers, I believe, are the captain had some 8,000 hours and the first officer, that's the co-pilot, had 1,000 hours. So that would mean that there was inexperience in the right-hand seat. But it's not looking like it is what you call a human error or pilot error type of accident. It's looking more like some sort of technical problem, a loss of power possibly. Obviously, the black boxes will have to be recovered. And as soon as they get those, then they'll be able to work out fairly quickly what the primary cause of this accident was. And I should point out that in most aircraft accidents, there's more than one cause. There's usually multiple reasons why there is an accident. It's rare that there's a single event or a single reason for an accident.
And Alistair, we can see the extraordinary pictures there of the tail piece of the fuselage there just poking out of the side of that residential block. Now, am I correct in saying that the black box, the recording instruments, are normally kept in that rearward position because that's the least likely to be damaged? And with that in mind, what's the timescale now of being able to get your hands on that device and be able to fully analyse it and microscopically being able to forensically tell us what the precise reasons for this crash were?
Well, if the black boxes were in the rear hold of the aircraft, and they usually are in the rear of the aircraft, then they should be relatively easy to recover if that part of the aircraft is intact, sitting on top of that building. But if they're part of the rest of the debris field amongst those buildings, then that's going to be rather awkward. It's unlike an accident that's in a field where every single piece of debris you see came from the aircraft. In this case, it's all mixed up with street furniture and whatever in the buildings, etc. So it's a complex recovery site, and also it seems to be teeming with people, and we do know from previous accidents, sad to say, that people do take souvenirs, but rather hope that in this case they get hold of both the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder. Those are the two black boxes, intact and in working order, and they can analyse them quickly. And we'll see that the aircraft manufacturer, I think it's General Electric and Boeing, they'll be involved in this accident, as will the Indian aviation authorities, their air traffic authorities, and then the various the nations from which the majority of passengers come from. So their countries will also be involved in this investigation. Everything will be pieced together. They should be able to fairly quickly find out what is the root cause of this accident and take remedial action to prevent it happening again. If it's aircraft specific, and it is tending to point that way, meaning that this particular accident may have been attributable to the Boeing 787 as opposed to any aircraft. So if it was a flock of birds that were flown into, for example, that wouldn't be aircraft specific accident. That could happen to any aircraft. But so it's very important to recover these two boxes and analyse them in detail and recreate the flight.
Thank you very much for joining us on GB News and sharing your expertise and giving us that analysis. And that's the former Boeing 747 pilot and aviation consultant, Alistair Rosenshine. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Now let's cross back now to our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark White, I believe you have a breaking news line for us. Tell us more.
Something that really sort of corroborates the news we were getting through from senior police officers in Ahmedabad about there being survivors. Campbell Wilson, the chief executive of Air India, has just released a video statement, of course expressing his sorrow, but he goes on to say, our efforts are now focused entirely on the needs of the passengers, crew members and their families and loved ones. And then says the injured passengers, plural, have been taken by local authorities to the nearest hospitals. Wow. Investigations will take time, but anything we can do, we're going to do. So I think that's clearly very important. This is the first time you're hearing it, and it is a video message which we'll endeavour to try and get downloaded that we can play out at some point. But that's Campbell Wilson, Managing Director and CEO of Air India, saying that there are injured passengers who have been taken by local authorities to the nearest hospitals. Just corroborating what we heard from a senior police chief about half an hour ago. First about one survivor, then indications another may be in hospital. Well, more than one report coming through now. So some encouraging signs in the midst, we have to say, of course, of a horrific, terrible tragedy.
Mark White, that would be astonishing news. When you see these images and the sheer payload of fuel on there, the immediate fireball that rose as his flight just went into that residential area. It just seems incredible that anybody could have survived such an impact, such an explosion, such an aftermath. And I heard you earlier on, Mark, saying, you know, people always cling on to any form of hope, any form of miracle. If two did survive this, Mark White, it would be astonishing.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, if you're the loved one of someone caught up in this, you're desperately going to cling on to any strand of hope that might be out there and never give up until you absolutely know for certain that your loved one has gone. And in such confusing mass casualty events like this, an air disaster, where you can just look at the images there, Martin, and see the mass of people around there, the injured. It's confusing. Although they might indicate, in terms of senior police officers, indicating that there is no indication of survivors. Of course, if you're the loved one of someone, you're just going to continue to pray to whoever you pray to in the hope that your loved one might survive. And this will give perhaps some renewed hope, but we don't want to put it much higher than that, because this is a horrific tragedy. The casualty score is very high indeed. The authorities have already indicated some 204 fatalities. Now, that may be a mix of people on the aircraft and on the ground, because this came down in a residential area, part of a medical residential complex as well. And we heard from the Indian equivalent of the British Medical Association that some 60 junior doctors, medical students, have been taken to hospital, some with critical injuries, others are injured, and others have succumbed to their injuries. And horrific that their friends and colleagues, probably as we speak, are involved in fighting to save the lives of others who are being taken, maybe even some of their own colleagues being taken to those same hospitals to be treated by their friends.
And Mark White, we just have a full video, I believe, to show now of the takeoff. Let's look at this on our screen. This is that fateful flight. We can see there taking off from Ahmedabad. That was around about 9:09 GMT this morning. Flight taking off, and we can see just leaving the ground now. Bear in mind, this flight only managed to be airborne for some 60 seconds. We can see everything completely normal up until this point. And this is where the experts, they're warning there are some distressing images. You can see now starting to lose height. Look, the pilot seems to be battling to get upward trajectory. That doesn't happen. The landing gear won't go in. The flaps aren't deployed, and it simply falls to the ground. And then you can see this massive fireball emerging, because that, of course, was 60 seconds into a 10-hour flight. That Boeing would have been fully laden with aviation fuel. Naturally, there's no stop-off. This is a continuous flight. So the maximum payload resulting in that huge explosion. Mark White, this shows us, I think, even clearer evidence of a flight that simply could not get upward trajectory.
Yeah, I mean, these are very, very harrowing images to watch. The final moments, of course, of those passengers bound for Gatwick Airport there. Now, I can't tell from looking at that whether the flaps are extended out or not. Others that will examine and pore over this will have a better idea. But yes, what it does show is the wheels are still down. They never go up at any point, so they haven't gone up and come down. The pilots appear to be fighting with the aircraft. Now, I'd hate to contradict someone as esteemed as Alistair Rosenshine, but it is clear that towards the end of that very short flight, that aircraft is tilting nose up as the pilots, it seems, are desperately trying to extend the glide, trying to get over perhaps those buildings. They might not even be aware of that, but just trying their level best to stay airborne. And that would explain as well why that tail is embedded in a building quite apart from all of the rest of the aircraft which continued on, because when you're pushing nose up to try and get more air over the wings to stay airborne, the net result of that is your nose is up but your tail is down, and the tail is the first thing to then strike an object, and in this case striking the building and being left embedded in that building. So you can see it's desperately trying to stay up. It might be momentarily a bit of a flat glide, but certainly in the final few seconds the pilots are pushing that nose up, clearly trying to just stay aloft for as long as possible. But absolutely devastating images to watch there, and just a warning to our audience, of course, and apologies for bringing you such disturbing images, but it is, I think, justifiable not to gratuitously keep showing them, but just to explain what we can see in terms of the final moments of this aircraft, to perhaps shed some light on it.
Mark, I'm just going to interject there. I've just been sent a line by my director. Reports coming into us that a British passenger may have survived. Reports coming in that a British passenger may have survived Air India flight 171. That's all we know at the moment. What an incredible line that is, Mark White. We just heard, as you said, a short moment ago, the CEO of Air India released that tantalising message that passengers, plural, as you said, being treated in hospital. And we've just had that breaking news line, reports coming in that a British passenger may have survived.
Well, Martin, I've also seen this report now. It's in the Hindustan Times. They give a name, but I'm going to take a bit of editorial advice before putting out that name, because we just don't know the variety. We can only take the report from the Hindustan Times, a reputable newspaper, of course, at face value, and that's fine. But the relatives of this person, you would hope, would know by now. But in the out of an abundance of caution, I'm not going to name him yet until we get word from our editorial managers that we should do that. But I can read out some quotes that he's given to the Hindustan Times. He said, "It all happened so quickly that he'd received impact injuries on his chest, on his eyes and feet. He said, when I got up, there were bodies all around me. I was scared. I stood up and ran. There were pieces of the plane all around me. Someone grabbed hold of me and put me in the ambulance and brought me to the hospital." So, I mean, just remarkable if this turns out absolutely to be the case. As I say, this is being reported by the Hindustan Times newspaper. They've named this individual, and as soon as we get clarification that we can go with that name, we will. But out of an abundance of caution, I just won't name this individual at the moment. But he said he heard a loud noise, Martin, around 30 seconds after takeoff before the plane went down. Now, that's new information, and I hadn't heard that anywhere else before. Clearly, no one's spoken to anyone on the aircraft. But he said, it's worth reiterating, he heard a loud noise 30 seconds or so after takeoff and before the plane went down.
And Mark White, the Times of London now corroborating that. Again, of course, we must not read out any name, because think about all those relatives who are waiting to find out who may be alive from that incredible footage there. But just to repeat here, G.S. Malik, who is the city's police commissioner, said that a passenger with a British passport in seat 11A was in hospital and under treatment. Seat 11A, it goes on to say, this is in the Times of London, just breaking now, is an emergency exit seat by the door. A video published by an Indian local media showed a man wearing a white T-shirt walking from the wreckage. It goes on to say the police found one survivor in seat 11A. One survivor has been found in the hospital and is under treatment. We cannot say anything about the number of deaths yet. The death toll may increase as the flight crashed into a residential area. Just to repeat, that is the city's police commissioner with the quite astonishing revelation. It seems to be growing evidence now, according to the local police. A passenger may have survived, and that passenger has a British passport. Incredible stuff, Mark White.
I mean, it is. The shared footage, apparently, on social media showed a man that appears, they say, to be this surviving passenger limping away from the crash site and being led towards emergency services. Limping away, just trying to get my head around actually how someone not only survived but could effectively walk away from such a horrific disaster. Now, if he was in seat 11C, that is towards the front of this aircraft. And, you know, there are various bulkheads, effectively points when an aircraft is assembled, you know, towards the front of the aircraft. You get a middle section, and then you get the sort of tail aft end of the aircraft. And these are kind of weak points to an extent in an aircraft that if it is involved in a catastrophic accident, they'll give way first at those sort of weak points. So it may be that over the door, over this area, where we think 11C might have been, that could be on one of these stress points. It's given away, and somehow he's been thrown clear just before this aircraft erupted into this fireball. But just the most amazing tale of survival, if this is borne out to be true. Initial reports being reported not just by, as you say, the Hindustan Times, but also the Times of London, quoting Commissioner Malik from the local police services there. Apparently, this individual says he'd lived in London for some 20 years. So, remarkable news. I just, you know, I'm rarely speechless, but I've got to say, I'm kind of lost for words at this.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. A miracle in Ahmedabad, if this is true. If a Brit simply walked away from what we see on our screens, it will be absolutely astonishing. Mark White, stick with us. We'll come back for some more reaction, of course, as the news is literally coming out by the second. I'm joined in the studio by Chris Hope, our political editor. We both, Chris, just had a breath taken away by that news. Absolutely. It is, you have to say it's a miracle that somebody could just walk away from something like this, if that's true. What's the political reaction been, Chris?
Shock, of course. We've seen remarks from Narendra Modi in India. We have Sir Keir Starmer saying that he's being busily kept updated as the situation develops. He may have more news on this when we see his team shortly for the lobby briefing. His thoughts are with the passengers and families, he says, at this deeply distressing time. David Lammy, he says the FCDO, the Foreign Office, is working urgently with local authorities to support British nationals and their families. We know there's 53 people could be dead, maybe fewer than that, given what we're hearing from Mark White just then. Also, Kevin Badenoch saying that her thoughts with the families affected. Heidi Alexander, she's the Transport Secretary. She sent 4 air accident investigators tonight from Heathrow to Ahmedabad. There's also one individual who's gone to Gatwick to support families who are gathering there, hoping against hope about some news from the aircraft operator. And also, just finally, from Nigel Farage, he went through a light aircraft crash back in 2010. He's talked quite movingly today about this, that you never know when your time comes, and really, in a sense, celebrate every day of life as you have it. He's been through the mill. It deeply affected him, that crash, and he's trying to put his head into how families are thinking.
Chris, I'm going to let you run because I know you're trying to get to lobby now to get a question in, and all question will be, is there any corroboration of this incredible revelation we're hearing in these last few moments?
Extraordinary.
Extraordinary. There could be a British survivor from this flight.
And that's because the plane fell from much shorter height. It wasn't at the kind of many thousands of feet. It was 400 feet in the air, and that is why there's a chance of survivors.
Just to repeat that breaking news, Chris, get yourself to the lobby and let's try and find out if there's any evidence to back up there could be a British survivor. Let's get some political reaction. Chris Hope's going to go to Downing Street. He'll be back shortly to try and corroborate that. Just to repeat this breaking news line, if you're joining us, it's one that took our breath away in the studio here. Still, honestly, Mark White's speech has got goosebumps about this. The breaking line is this, and this is from the Times of London. One person is believed to have survived the Air India 171 crash, police have said. C.G.S. Malik, the city's police commissioner, said that a passenger with a British passport in seat 11A was in hospital and is currently under treatment. Seat 11A is an emergency exit seat by the door. And Mark White there just saying there is video evidence seeming to show a passenger simply walking away from that astonishing fireball you can see on our screens. It's an incredible breaking news line. Let's develop that more now if we can. I'm joined by the former Times of India journalist Rahul Mitra. Rahul, welcome to the show. Simply incredible line there. Seems to have been verified from 2 sources. The Air India CEO said there are passengers, survivors being treated in hospital. Now this latest line, the city's police commissioner saying a survivor with a British passport.
Well, firstly, I think this fact that we have a survivor who actually was able to jump off is a miracle, and hoping against hope. I hope there are more survivors. I really feel at this point in time that miracles happen to those who believe in miracles, and I, like each one of us, we are hoping for more miracles like this. But I think what is important is that the right information should reach out to the near and dear ones, because right now the plight of the relatives of those who were on this ill-fated flight is something that I just can't get out of my mind. And like I said earlier on your show, I've lost my father in an air crash, so I can relate so much, because I have gone through this, faced this tragedy up and close. So I just hope and wish that the information, timely information goes out. I hope that this survivor does well. I hope there are many more survivors, hoping against hope, and also the people on the ground. Since it's this particular crash unfortunately happened in the heart of the city, hence the safety of the people on the ground. And we need to ensure that the people on the ground are safe as well. And also the ones who are carrying out the rescue operations. They need to take care, because there was so much of fuel, and oh my God, just look at the black smoke rising. It's horrific. It is devastating.
And Rahul, you're exactly right. We must temper the exaltation of the prospect of a survivor with the realisation that many, many perished in the most unforgivable and unimaginable of circumstances. Rahul, may I ask you, and I please don't wish to cause you any personal trauma, reflecting on what you've been through in your life, seeing the scenes today, you must have been yourself, I'm getting emotional myself, you must have been yourself, clinging to that miracle that your father could have survived. And when you see this and hear what's happening today, it must be incredible for you.
Absolutely. While my elder brother, Mr. Vipul Mitra, he lives in Ahmedabad, and he was the first one to put this out on the family group. And right after that, oh my God, I just left everything, and I just wanted to know what's happening. And since it crashed, it just took off and it crashed. So while going through the reports, I heard of a tree, and I heard how the plane went down, and I was taken back into time when I was just barely out of my teens, when my late father, a bureaucrat, was out on some government work in a chopper, and how his chopper had entangled in a tree just very close to the airport. In fact, his chopper had crashed barely a few minutes before landing. And hence, it's just that why did the chopper have to go and crash in the tree? So, I mean, all those images were coming back to my mind, and the trauma that I faced being the youngest, kid in the house, and my mother and my brothers and all of us, we had to go through. So I, at this point, am totally connected with the families of each one of those people who were on this ill-fated flight. I can imagine what they would be going through. And hence, it is imperative that the right information goes out, and so that they know what has happened. It is important for each one of them to know. I saw some reports which I can understand a tragedy of this scale. It's not easy to carry out the rescue operations. I saw some reports, and I'm told that Government of India, the Prime Minister, Civil Aviation Minister, everybody would be on the ground at the moment. This is a massive tragedy, and the rescue operations need to be taken care of. But it is important that the relatives know what has happened, and then the rescue operations are carried out, even if a single survivor is found or anybody who's injured on the ground. I think quickly the rescue operations need to be done, and I'm sure that the state government is taking care of that.
And Rahul, I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you for sharing that story with us today. And as you say, it's so important that our information is accurate, but we are putting out the information we believe to be accurate. The city's police commissioner saying there's believed to be one passenger with a British passport who has survived. Rahul Mitra, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your personal experience and your grief. And that line you said, miracles happen to people who believe in miracles, deeply, deeply moved me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. OK, let's go back now to GBNews Home and Security Editor Mark White, who I believe has some fresh information for us, Mark, on what is turning out to be a simply astonishing day.
Well, the most remarkable story of survival, it seems, that we can now bring you a name that's been reported now by the Hindustan Times and other outlets now of that survivor, 40-year-old Vishwas Kumar Ramesh. There you see him in hospital, his face a bit bloodied and battered, but he was able to walk away from this Boeing 787 as it burst into flames. He was sat, we're told, in seat 11A. There are other images that show a man in a white T-shirt limping, but otherwise able to walk away from that scene, from that aircraft crash, with some blood stain on his white T-shirt, a bit of blackened suit, the odd mark on the white T-shirt, but really just able to walk away from that aircraft. So somehow he was flung free of the aircraft before it was engulfed in this fireball, and that millisecond before that happened. But he is a 40-year-old man who spent the last 20 years in London. He had been on that flight, we're told, with his brother. We have no word at this point about his brother, the fate of his loved one, his brother who was on that flight with him. But just to reiterate, this man that you're looking at there, the images, according to the Hindustan Times and now reported in other outlets, is 40-year-old Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, a 40-year-old British national, and the miracle of this absolutely horrific tragedy. The hope has to be that, like Mr. Ramesh, other people have been just as lucky, have been able somehow to survive this horrific event.
You know, Mark White, I'm like you were a moment ago, I'm just completely lost for words. The fact that somebody could walk away from that, it just looked like, you know, just a huge, huge fireball. I don't know if anybody watching this believes in God, maybe you don't. It just feels like some sort of miracle. You know, when we spoke there to Rahul Mitra, the former Times of India journalist who lost his father in a crash, and he said, you know, miracles happen to people who believe in miracles. What can this be? Oh, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, 40-year-old, just walked away from that scene. Sometimes, Mark White, human life just absolutely blows your mind and takes your breath away.
Yeah, I mean, it's a one chink of light in the most horrible of events today, but we must, of course, acknowledge that there are very significant numbers of people who will not be celebrating at all. The death toll at the moment, according to Indian officials, is 204 people that they have been able to remove from the scene and either take to hospitals or sort of take them to another place for the moment. 204, but what we don't know at this time, Martin, is whether that is accounting for 204 people who are on the aircraft, whether it may include many people who are on the ground, because we know that this was a residential complex that this 787 crashed into, and multiple medical doctors, who were in residence there in the residential block, about 60 we're told, have been taken to hospital with various injuries, some described as being in critical condition, other doctors who are missing and others who are dead, and then other residents as well. But this one man, a 40-year-old British national, will just reiterate his name, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, who was on board that aircraft. We will, we're not showing this gratuitously, but we will show you again the final moments of that 787. So a warning to our viewers that these are distressing images of the final seconds of that Boeing Dreamliner as it takes off. And it's really obvious, I think, to anybody looking at this, you don't have to be an expert. The undercarriage of the aircraft doesn't retract as it's supposed to do within the first 10, 15 seconds of flight. That aircraft, while raising up slightly, then starts to come down rather rapidly at that point where we are now just seconds away from the aircraft colliding into buildings. Just one final point that I think is a key point of the evidence that the investigators will get from this 40-year-old British national, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh. He says that he heard a loud noise around 30 seconds after takeoff before the plane went down.
Mark White, it's just incredible stuff. Thank you so much for bringing us up to speed. And let's speak now with GB News' reporter Adam Cherry, who's at Gatwick Airport, of course, where that flight was due to land shortly after 6 p.m. Adam Cherry, just incredible information there, incredible imagery. An individual, Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, remarkably, perhaps miraculously, survived that crash. And now there'll be relatives at that airport, at least one of those sets of relatives, knowing that he walked away from this. It's just incredible.
That's right, Martin. As you said, it's a miracle. Just extraordinary footage. You've been showing some of it throughout this afternoon. Just going to bring you a statement from the Chief Executive of Gatwick Airport. This is from Stuart Wingate, and he sent this statement out earlier this afternoon. He says, "We are very saddened to hear about today's accident involving Air India flight AI171, and our thoughts are with the family and friends of those on board. We can confirm that flight AI171 that was involved in an accident shortly after departure from Ahmedabad Airport today was due to land, as you say, Martin, was due to land at Gatwick at 6:25 this evening. London Gatwick is liaising closely with Air India, and a reception centre for relatives of those on board is being set up where information and support will be provided. The airport, they say, it usually has around 12 weekly departures, Air India departures from Gatwick, from here at Gatwick Airport, and including 5 weekly departures to Ahmedabad. Now, I've just been to the check-in desk area on the South Terminal, and all the Air India departure desks, the check-in desks rather, are now closed. But other than that, there are still, of course, thousands of passengers arriving here, all of them feeling a little bit more, uneasy given today's events. It's just extraordinary.
Thank you, Adam Cherry. Amidst the unimaginable horror of the Air India flight 171, there's been a miracle in Ahmedabad. A British survivor, Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, remarkably walked away from that tragedy. We'll have full details on this incredible story coming up, but first, here's your weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. We've got heat, we've got humidity, and we've got some big downpours, and as a result, Met Office yellow warnings have been issued. We've already seen some pretty heavy rain around this area of low pressure across parts of the west today. That low pressure is wafting the air up from the south. That's why it's warm, that's why it's humid. Plenty of sunshine over eastern England and much of Scotland, but in Scotland in particular, that rain is marching northwards. Very heavy still through the afternoon across Northern Ireland, spreading into western Scotland, easing off a bit as it does so, but still some hefty downpours likely this evening, particularly over North Wales, northwest England and southwest Scotland. Even as it turns dry, it will stay warm and humid. The winds will be easing, but temperatures holding up in the mid-teens in most towns and cities. Now, Friday is another fine day for a good part of the country. Certainly sunny skies across much of northeast Scotland. It won't be as windy here as well. There won't be as much of that low cloud lapping onto the coast. Still pretty cloudy in Northern Ireland. Maybe not as persistent, the rain, as today, but some heavy downpours likely here, especially around the middle part of the day. We start largely dry across England and Wales, maybe 1 or 2 showers in West Wales, but they shouldn't be as intense, again, as the downpours have been today, at least at this stage. Most of us will have a fine, bright day tomorrow. Plenty of very warm, if not hot sunshine, especially in the east, but further south, the storms are gathering once more. We'll see some hefty downpours returning to parts of the south coast by the end of the afternoon. Warm and humid for most places, and look at these numbers across eastern England with some sunshine getting up into the high 20s. The thundery showers then march northwards during Friday evening. The potential for some disruption as they affect parts of southern England, spread into Wales, and then drift northwards through the night into the Midlands and eventually into northern England. Still some of those heavy downpours around on Saturday. Met Office warnings are in place, so check those the Met Office website for full details.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Motorists face delays on the M25 anti-clockwise, with 2 lanes closed between junction 29 and 28 following a collision, causing 40-minute delays. On the M90 at Broxton roundabout, expect disruptions due to a vehicle breakdown on the exit to the A9 southbound. In York, debris causes 1-lane closure on the A64 eastbound entry slip from the A166. Swindon's A419 northbound has 1 lane closed due to a police incident, causing 15-minute delays. The A50 in Staffordshire is experiencing significant congestion eastbound between the A522 and the A518 junction. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
£54,321 in totally tax-free cash could make your year the best yet. How would you react if you got that winning call?
Oh my God, I'm going to cry. Oh my God. Thank you.
You weren't expecting to get that call today, were you?
No, I wasn't.
For a chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, our top story, as an Air India flight bound for London Gatwick crashed shortly after takeoff. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner was engulfed in a huge fireball after plummeting into a building in the suburb of Ahmedabad in western India. Local police have said over 200 bodies have been recovered from the site, but there is one survivor, according to reports, who is believed to be British. That man has been named, and throughout the show, we bring you all of the very latest on this tragic and yet incredible story. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. In other news today, 3 teenagers have been charged with riot offences following a third night of disorder in Northern Ireland. The disorder largely took place in Ballymena, but violence has spread to other towns, including Larne, where a leisure centre providing emergency shelter for relocated families was attacked and set on fire. Authorities have described it as racist thuggery targeted at ethnic minorities and police officers. One man is clearly seen throwing a machete towards security services. 32 police officers were injured and 6 people arrested on the first 2 nights of violence. Deputy First Minister Emma Little Pengelly says the government is working to reassure the local community.
No woman or girl walking about should feel fearful. We've got our Ending Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, and of course we've got a number of schemes running. We're working with the PSNI, we're working with local councils to tackle the scourge of that misogyny, of that violence against women and girls. So we want to reassure everyone that we are working hard to try to ensure that everybody remains safe. But we are listening to those concerns. We must listen to those concerns, and we need to stamp out that violence against women and girls.
The Chancellor says she's disappointed after new figures show the UK economy shrank by 0.3% in April. The sharper than expected decline comes a day after Rachel Reeves promised to boost growth in her spending review. Her plans included an extra £29 billion a year for the NHS in England and boosts for defence, education and housing, although some departments will see their budgets squeezed. Economists say tax rises will be almost inevitable in the autumn. Rachel Reeves, though, has defended her announcements.
You have to get the balance right between tax, spending and borrowing. And if you said yes to every request for more money, you'd end up in the same position that Liz Truss ended up in, which is crashing the economy, sending mortgage rates spiralling and causing the cost of living crisis that's done so much damage.
Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride has accused Ms Reeves of economic vandalism, saying taxpayers will foot the bill.
The answer is it's coming by way of far higher taxes, particularly on businesses, and that is destroying growth. It has also come by way of huge levels of additional borrowing, which has been inflationary, which has been interest rates have been higher for longer, our national debt growing, and the servicing costs of that debt, because of the higher interest rates, now running at £100 billion per year. That's twice what we spend on defence, and that's leaving us overall in a very fragile position with a lot of challenges ahead, and a lot of people worried now that we're going to be looking at potentially very significant further tax rises in the autumn.
Elsewhere, the US is scaling back its embassy staff in Iraq, as well as from military bases in the region over heightened security threats. It comes over fears of reprisals amid reports that Israel's preparing to attack Iran's nuclear program without US support. Diplomatic staff will leave Baghdad, along with a partial withdrawal of staff from bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. It's been announced by US President Donald Trump, who said he was less confident now that negotiations with Iran would succeed. A curfew has been in place for a second night in Los Angeles amid hundreds of arrests as protests against Donald Trump's immigration raids continue. The sixth day of demonstrations have been largely peaceful, but there have been sporadic outbreaks of violence. Almost 400 people have been arrested in LA since protests began on Friday. The governor of California says President Trump has escalated tensions with an unnecessary and illegal deployment of federal troops. The White House is reviewing a multi-billion-dollar submarine deal signed with the UK and Australia. Washington want to make sure it's aligned with President Trump's America First agenda. The AUKUS Pact would provide Australia with its first nuclear submarines and has been widely seen as a response to the threat of China. Australia's Defence Minister says he's confident the pact will succeed. And one of the world's most active volcanoes is still erupting. Kilauea on Hawaii's Big Island has been spewing fountains of lava more than 330 feet in the air. It's the latest event in an eruption which started nearly 6 months ago. Scientists with the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory say the fountains could climb even higher as the activity intensifies. And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more news from me at 4:30.
Thank you, Tatiana. Our top story today. Over 50 British nationals are feared dead after an Air India flight bound for London Gatwick crashed shortly after takeoff. But according to Indian media, a British national has survived the Air India plane crash. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh said he heard a loud noise around 30 seconds after takeoff before the plane went down. You can see pictures of your screen of him now. A miraculous survival. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh there. That's the first picture of him. He survived that crash. And the Boeing 787 Dreamliner was engulfed in a huge fireball after plummeting into a building in the suburb of Ahmedabad in western India. And local police have said over 200 bodies have been recovered from that site. We can now speak with GB News' Homeland Security editor, Mark White. Mark, I was so touched earlier in the show, earlier in the day, when you said people will just cling onto the hope of a miracle, of what seemed, initially we heard reports, all passengers feared dead, and yet, in this past 20 minutes, this astonishing story, a miracle in Ahmedabad, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, a British citizen, simply walked away from this carnage.
Yeah, and we're hoping to bring you more astonishing images of this miraculous escape from that fireball. NDTV, who are one of the main Indian news broadcasters, news channel, have images that they believe show this man, this 40-year-old British national, staggering away from that air crash. So we're endeavouring to get those images to you, and we'll bring them to you shortly. We do, as clearly we see him afterwards now in the hospital bed, bloodied and bruised, but just so lucky to really have survived with nothing more than those clear facial images and some damage to his leg, because he was obviously limping. But we want to show you another image. It's a graphic image of the inside configuration of a 787 Dreamliner aircraft, and you can clearly see, as we've highlighted in the red box, seat 11A, which is the seat that Vishwas Kumar Ramesh was sitting in. He was there, he'd been in Ahmedabad for just a few days. He was there and planning, obviously, to return to Gatwick Airport. He was with his brother, AJ. AJ, he said, though, was sitting a number of rows away from him at that point. But where he is on the aircraft certainly looks as though that is near the exit doors. And we know the way that these aircraft are manufactured. They're manufactured in sections, and in terms of a very violent impact, an aircraft will break up along those kind of initial lines where they were welded and bolted together in those initial sections, and the likes of the towards the wings there as you're going back on the aircraft could certainly be one of those points where there is that kind of structural weak point. Whatever was the cause of this miraculous escape, it seems somehow he was flung free from the aircraft in the milliseconds before this fireball erupted. And he said that he could see bodies all around him as he staggered away from the aircraft and got medical assistance fairly quickly from the authorities as they arrived there. Very importantly, I think potentially it could be an important point that the investigators will want to discuss with this man, the sole survivor that we know of. There may be others, and we can only hope that there are others, Martin, but at the moment he is the only survivor that we know of, but he has a key insight, clearly, having been on that plane, and especially as he's already told reporters that he heard a loud noise around 30 seconds after this aircraft took off and just before the plane went down. Now, what on earth that noise could have been, I don't know. But a warning, we're going to show distressing images again of the final moments of this flight as it takes off from the main airport in Ahmedabad, going into the climb there at the end of the runway, rotating to go up what should be the climb to its cruising altitude. But it's very clear, although the nose is up initially and it does gain some altitude, it's then sort of coming down. The nose, it seems, kind of flattens out a bit before a few seconds later the nose tips up again, and that might explain why we see the tail section of this aircraft that appears to have embedded in a building, but otherwise not too badly damaged. It's sheared off. And there, of course, the very distressing images of that fireball, that huge fireball that erupted just on impact. So, I mean, that just shows you it was milliseconds. It must have been just as the plane was impacting the ground that this 40-year-old British national, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, was somehow thrown away from the danger zone, the explosion, and managed to walk out of that.
And Mark White, we've just had a latest breaking news line. At least 290 people now feared dead, according to police sources in India, bearing in mind 242 passengers. So that would indicate, Mark White, some 50-odd or perhaps more on the ground. Of course, the aircraft went into a residential area believed to be blocks where doctors were living. I think I heard reports some 200 were living in that block. So the body count, the death count, Mark White, now increasing, and yet at the same time, Mark White, adding further incredible... just trying to get my head around, how anybody could have walked away from that firebomb we just saw there, of that plane going down. This individual, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, has to be, I don't know, touched by the hand of God. An incredible chain reaction of most incredible good fortune. Who knows? But the latest line there, Mark White, 290 at least now feared dead.
Yes, and that would, of course, indicate 52 others have died on the ground so far. And you're right, yes, there was a residential block, residential complex, really, for medical staff working in the local area hospitals. And there were 96, I think, separate flats for some of those junior doctors, and 200 or so were living in those flats at the time when this plane came down. We got a report from the Indian equivalent of the British Medical Association about an hour and a half ago or so, saying that 60 of those junior doctors, those medical students, were taken to hospitals with varying degrees of injury, some in a critical condition, others less severely injured. But in addition to those 60 medical staff who've been injured, there were also family members of those medical staff members who were caught up in this and either injured, missing or dead. And clearly, I mean, we are seeing, we had hoped that perhaps the aircraft had come down in a part of this residential area that wasn't that built up, but we have seen other images that show buildings, not high-rise buildings, but apartments of 3 or 4 stories in height that are burnt out, that clearly were impacted, if not by the aircraft, certainly by the many thousands of tons or hundreds of tons of aviation fuel that spilled from this aircraft and enveloped everything around it. I mean, I think what's most incredible about the survival of this young 40-year-old man, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, is that when you saw the images there of the aircraft descending, it was literally at the point that the aircraft impacted the ground that it exploded. So there were, just milliseconds really to be thrown free of that wreckage. Somehow he managed it. Spoke of walking through an area surrounded by bodies, eyewitnesses. And as I say, in that video that we hope to bring you shortly, you will see a man who NDTV in India say is Vishwas Kumar Ramesh staggering from that fireball to passers-by and eventually rescuers.
Just such an incredible story, touched by the hand of God, perhaps. Vishwas Kumar Ramesh simply walked away. I think we have that footage now, do we? We're trying to get that footage uploaded.
Yes, Martin, we can now take you to... this is a clip off air from NDTV. So you're just seeing... So that's him walking away there, according to NDTV, just limping away there. But, I mean, there's a trace of some blood on that white T-shirt, soot marks. And, you know, just incredible that he is able not only to survive this, but the fact that he's on his feet, Martin, and walking out there, I think clearly, by the looks of it, just not wanting to speak to people as he moves towards an ambulance there. But just incredible and amazing, you know, that NDTV and India have managed to obtain these images, and our thanks to them for that.
It's just almost impossible to compute that that man there walking away, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, it's just impossible to believe he's been in a plane crash. You know, he looks like no more injured than if he'd fallen off a push bike. It's simply miraculous, that footage just coming out. Let's join now the aviation journalist Josh Cahill. Josh, simply mind-blowing imagery of that British national there just walking away. How can we try and make sense of what some people might think is a miracle? Let's start with where he was sitting on that flight. So seat 11A, an emergency exit seat. How could it possibly have worked? We can see pictures on our screen there now. A lot of people are familiar with themselves sitting on flights. That, as I understand it, having sat on lots of flights like this, would be the front row of economy, right? And that's near the exit to his immediate left. How could a flight go down, as we saw, plummeting from the sky, that ginormous fireball? How could a passenger in that seat possibly have survived?
It is an absolute miracle. And generally, people say the back of the aircraft is the safer part. In a case of a crash like this, it's an absolute miracle. It is 11A. This is the seat right at the door, so everybody will enter the airplane right there. It's the section between business class and economy, and as many said, it is just an absolute miracle that he was able to survive. The rotating speed of a 787 Dreamliner is 240 kilometers per hour, and the impact must have been probably around the same. If you sit in a car that crashes against a wall with 200 plus kilometer per hour, you'd be certainly dead. I have no explanation how he was able to survive such an impact.
Is there any notion of the doors being automatically? I'm just trying to make sense of this from the knowledge I have of, say, being a car passenger. Is there a deployment of those doors upon impact, just blasting open and flinging people out, or is this likely just to be some, I don't know, fantastical combination of physics and luck? And try and help me make sense of this, because I can't.
I think it must have been just pure luck, because an impact like this, there's no safety measures in plane. If you have a ditching on water or you have a controlled emergency landing, given that he was sitting on 11A, he would be the first to evacuate the plane, slides, deploy, and that would have been an indicator if there was an emergency landing. But given the impact and that the plane was like suddenly like plummeting into that residential area, I think it is just like a chain of miracles that happened there, that he survived this crash. I don't know how else to explain, because there is nothing, there's no ejecting seats, there is nothing that could have helped him in this situation given the impact.
And Josh, in terms of, I mean, this flight of 60 seconds into a 10-hour flight, maximum payload of aviation fuel, which of course made it that highly explosive fireball. In terms of the physical aspects of one of these aircraft, a 787, where are the fuel tanks in relation to where he's sitting? Mark White said upon impact they're designed almost to fragment into different sections. Could part of the miracle of Ahmedabad here be that the fuel tanks were behind him, the nose broke away, he was flung out? I mean, is that possible?
It could have been. So the fuel tanks are located usually inside the wings and under the wings, so in the central section of the airplane. But once again, I don't think that he might have been thrown out of the airplane and landed somewhere safely. But as said before, there's no reason to believe that his seat or the position where he was, because everybody else, including the person sitting next to him, must have not been able to survive the crash. And that is still, there's a lot of questions that need to be asked. And as you can see, the plane literally 10 seconds after rotating off the runway seemed to lose all power and was just going down. I don't even think anyone was really aware in that moment that the plane is not climbing anymore, because from the second it lost all the power to impact, it was another 10-15 seconds. So this plane wasn't longer airborne than 30-40 seconds. And I don't even think the crew was preparing the passengers for the impact, because everything was happening so fast. And yeah, as you said, it is a miracle.
Josh Cahill, thank you for trying to help us make sense. Perhaps we can't. Perhaps we will never be able to make sense of what is a simply miraculous escape. We must, however, repeat the latest information we have from police. 290 now feared dead. 242 passengers were on board. The miracle in Ahmedabad. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, a British national, survived. 290 feared dead in total, including those on the ground. Thank you, Josh Cahill, for joining us. And we'll bring you all the very latest on the plane crash in India next, and we have some political reaction from Downing Street. Stick with us.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we are proud to stand for you, for the Britain you love, for the communities you live in. That's what makes us the fearless champions of Britain. Its voices and its values. Because we, at GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's news channel.
News channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This Saturday, join GB News as we mark the King's official birthday. Trooping the Colour, hosted by Charlie Peters, Miriam Cates and me, Cameron Walker, live from Buckingham Palace from 10 a.m. this Saturday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:27. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, I'm joined in the studio for some political reaction to today's Air India tragedy by GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, what's been the political reaction to this incredible disaster and also now the miracle in Ahmedabad, a British survivor?
Yes, well, expressions of horror and thoughts of the families across the board. We've heard David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, saying that crisis teams are being scrambled in Delhi and in London, of course, because there are dozens of relatives who were expecting to greet their loved ones off that flight at Gatwick this evening. He has used the word devastating. That seems to be the word that so many people are talking about. The Scottish First Minister, John Swinney, said he was watching with absolute horror. Kemi Badenoch, horrifying tragedy, and the Prime Minister, of course, at the top of this and the crisis response. Our political editor, Chris Hope, was in the lobby briefing with political journalists just in the last few minutes. News from that is that Number 10 has said that the United Kingdom should prepare for significant loss of life. We know, of course, there were 53 British nationals on board. It sounds incredibly like one has survived, but horrific news for dozens of other families. And Number 10 has said that this crash is deeply distressing for families. The Foreign Office is in crisis mode to support families. And the Prime Minister sent condolences to Indian Prime Minister Modi. The British High Commissioner also been scrambled. So the whole machinery of government now kicking into gear to do everything it can to support people, both here in London and in India. It's just beyond imagining, isn't it?
And we're learning here as well that the British government is to support in the Indian investigation by deploying expertise to try and ascertain what on earth happened. The huge question now be what went wrong, what caused this unimaginable disaster. Thank you, Catherine Forster, for bringing us up to speed with the political aspect. Of course, we'll get more reaction throughout the rest of the show from Downing Street. But let's join our next guest now. And that is journalist and broadcaster Yash Sharma. Yash, welcome to the show. Unimaginable horror, 53 Britons on board, 242 passengers. The latest line we have, 290 feared dead. Of course, the impact on a residential area, medical students in some of those blocks that were hit. And yet, amidst all of this, a miracle in Ahmedabad, a British national simply walking away. It's an astonishing story.
Yes, definitely. I mean, the video of Vishwas Kumar Ramesh is splashed all across social media, and of him walking on a street in Ahmedabad, right next to the crash site. And it's as per the media reports, we know that even his brother was on the plane. His name was Ajay, and he was sitting on a different row from him. But how he managed to get out, it's still a mystery. But this is, I mean, from the looks of it, it's sheer luck, and very fortunate, and really, really glad for his family. I've read that his wife and his son live in UK, and he was for a family meet in India. He was here, but so far, unfortunately, we have only news of only one survivor from this. He was seated on 11A of the 171 aircraft. Yes.
And, you know, Yash Sharma, I just spoke to an aviation expert a few moments ago, and I said to him, how could this have happened? How could he have survived? And he said, I simply don't know. It's almost like the most astonishing chain reaction of good fortune, of circumstance, perhaps even an act of God.
Yes, yes, perhaps yes, because the video of him emerged rightly shot after local police chief told multiple news media outlets in Ahmedabad that there were perhaps no survivors and no one had survived the crash. And from the initial looks of the plane and the crash site that we saw, it looked. I mean, the first reaction was that it's hard that anybody would have survived that. But there's this UK citizen Vishwas Kumar Ramesh who has survived, and it's of course. I mean, yes, from the looks of it, definitely you can say it is an act of God. Because I mean, the visuals are horrific, and there's perhaps no explanation how he survived. We might have that on the later part, but right now we don't have that.
And yes, of course, amidst this miracle, we must remember the huge backdrop of tragedy. 290 feared dead, at least, according to Indian police there on the ground. And Yash, I wanted to ask you about something else which has just come out, and that is the Tata Group, which of course owns Indian Airlines. We're hearing rumours, well, confirmation actually, of them offering a financial package to people, the aggrieved, 10 million rupees per family. That's around £86,000. Do you think that feels a bit premature, a bit soon?
I mean, the report is there, but to many it may even seem offensive that this came so soon. We do not even have the exact number of casualties that we know so far. There are people even on the ground that are feared to be dead, and that includes dozens. I think we do not have the final reports yet, but the site where the plane crashed, it's a residential area where a hostel of a medical school was there. So we are hearing that there are dead among those who were on the ground as well. So this announcement from the Tata Group does seem a bit premature, but I mean, the eyes are a lot more on the investigation that has started under the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau of India, and they have alerted Boeing company already. And I mean, we are not expecting to see a reason of how it happened and an explanation of how and why it happened. But I mean, yeah, all eyes are on the investigation now. Because I mean, that is where the reason would come across, and that is where we all should be able to understand that where the lapses happened, perhaps.
OK, Yash Sharma, thank you very much for joining us on GB News. Thank you for your input. Thank you. OK, now it's time for your latest news headlines, and here's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. In other news, 3 teenagers have been charged with riot offences following a third night of disorder in Northern Ireland. The disorder largely took place in Ballymena, but violence has spread to other towns, including Larne, where a leisure centre providing emergency shelter for relocated families was attacked and set on fire. Authorities have described it as racist thuggery targeted at ethnic minorities and police officers. One man is clearly seen throwing a machete towards security services. 32 officers were injured and 6 people arrested on the first 2 nights of violence. The Chancellor says she's disappointed after new figures show the UK economy shrank by 0.3% in April. The sharper-than-expected decline comes a day after Rachel Reeves promised to boost growth in her spending review. Her plans included an extra £29 billion a year for the NHS in England and boosts for defence, education and housing, although some departments will see their budget squeezed. Economists say tax rises will be almost inevitable in the autumn. Rachel Reeves, though, defended her announcements.
You have to get the balance right between tax, spending and borrowing. And if you said yes to every request for more money, you'd end up in the same position that Liz Truss ended up in, which is crashing the economy, sending mortgage rates spiralling and causing the cost of living crisis that's done so much damage.
Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride has accused the Chancellor of economic vandalism, saying taxpayers will foot the bill.
The question that needs to be asked is, where is the money coming from? It's all very well to say you're spending all this cash left, right and centre. Well, the answer is it's coming by way of far higher taxes.
And one of the world's most active volcanoes is erupting again. Kilauea on Hawaii's Big Island has been spewing fountains of lava more than 330 feet in the air. It's the latest event in an eruption which started almost 6 months ago. Scientists with the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory say the fountains could climb even higher as the activity intensifies. And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more news from me at 5 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Done. My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3587 and €1.1738. The price of gold is £2,487 and 33 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,893 points.
Done. My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Good afternoon. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. We've got heat, we've got humidity, and we've got some big downpours, and as a result, Met Office yellow warnings have been issued. We've already seen some pretty heavy rain around this area of low pressure across parts of the west today. That low pressure is wafting the air up from the south. That's why it's warm, that's why it's humid. Plenty of sunshine over eastern England and much of Scotland, but in Scotland in particular, that rain is marching northwards. Very heavy still through the afternoon across Northern Ireland, spreading into western Scotland, easing off a bit as it does so, but still some hefty downpours likely this evening, particularly over North Wales, northwest England and southwest Scotland. Even as it turns dry, it will stay warm and humid. The winds will be easing, but temperatures holding up in the mid-teens in most towns and cities. Now, Friday is another fine day for a good part of the country. Certainly sunny skies across much of northeast Scotland. It won't be as windy here as well. There won't be as much of that low cloud lapping onto the coast. Still pretty cloudy in Northern Ireland. Maybe not as persistent, the rain, as today, but some heavy downpours likely here, especially around the middle part of the day. We start largely dry across England and Wales, maybe one or two showers in West Wales, but they shouldn't be as intense, again, as the downpours have been today, at least at this stage. Most of us will have a fine, bright day tomorrow. Plenty of very warm, if not hot sunshine, especially in the east, but further south, the storms are gathering once more. We'll see some hefty downpours returning to parts of the south coast by the end of the afternoon. Warm and humid for most places, and look at these numbers across eastern England with some sunshine getting up into the high 20s. The thundery showers then march northwards during Friday evening. The potential for some disruption as they affect parts of southern England, spread into Wales, and then drift northwards through the night into the Midlands and eventually into northern England. Still some of those heavy downpours around on Saturday. Met Office warnings are in place, so check those website, the Met Office website, for full details.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. Today, drivers on the A50 eastbound in Staffordshire between the A522 and A518 Uttoxeter to East face congestion with delays of around 30 minutes. This should clear by 8 tonight. In Luton, the M1 northbound between junction 10 and 11 is experiencing significant delays due to a road traffic collision, with 2 out of 3 lanes closed. These disruptions are expected to ease by 5 tonight. And on the trains, there are disruptions on Great Western Railway between Exeter St David's and Okehampton, and delays with ScotRail between Helensburgh Upper and Oban or Mallaig. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Welcome back. It's 20 to 5. You with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, over 50 British nationals are feared dead after an Air India flight bound for London Gatwick crashed shortly after takeoff early today. But according to Indian media, a British national has miraculously survived the Air India plane crash. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh said he heard a loud noise around 30 seconds after takeoff before the plane went down. And the Boeing 787 Dreamliner was engulfed in a huge fireball after plummeting into a building in the suburb of Ahmedabad in western India. and local police have said. They've confirmed that over 290 people have now died. Well, we can speak now with the aviation expert, Anita Mendirata. Anita, welcome to the show. You know, we've been trying our best to try and work out how on earth the passenger in seat 11A could possibly have survived. Can you help us shed any light on what just seems to be an abject miracle?
I think, as you're using the word correctly, it is miraculous that it's happened, especially when you consider the fact that the flight was on departure, which means it was operating with a full tank of fuel. We're looking at about 130 tons worth of jet fuel. So how he was able to manage the explosion, the impact as well, is quite remarkable. So there's much information to be understood about what exactly happened in Ahmedabad this morning, or this afternoon rather, in local time, but we need to establish this miraculous recovery of a passenger within that mix as well.
Anita, if we get on the screen now, we have a picture of the seating plan. Many people watching this will, many people, sorry, we don't have that. Many people will recall themselves sitting. That's basically the first row of economy. It's an emergency exit seat. It's towards the front of the aircraft. We're always led to believe that's the most dangerous place, and you're safer towards the rear of the craft. Anita, this just seems to defy everything we know to be logical.
You're absolutely right. And again, when it comes to passengers and where they should sit on the aircraft, this is often a situation that is being examined after an incident. But it all depends as well, Martin, on the type of incident. Again, this is one where you had a massive explosion, plus you had a high degree of impact. So it depends very much on if there was an impact, is it better to be at the back of the plane? If there's an explosion, is it better to be far from where the fuel is carried? How he could have survived both of those extreme events in this incident is remarkable. So I think there's as much prayer to be given to as the speculation that's underway.
Yeah, I think a lot of people watching that footage of the individual, this miracle man, Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, simply walking away with, let's face it, as you can see on your screen there, if you can't listen on the radio, it's a man just walking away. There's a little bit of blood on his T-shirt. He's shooing away reporters, slightly limping, but I mean, he could have fallen off a push bike. It's just incredible. This individual has just got out of an aircraft that went up in a huge fireball, hundreds of tons of aviation fuel, ploughed into residential areas. Anita, he's just walking away.
I think what's really important about what you're saying, Martin, is that physically he might be walking away, but this poor soul is traumatized for the rest of his life, as are those around, as are everyone who's been involved in this incident, whether they're a spectator or whether they're directly involved on the ground. This is incredibly important when it comes to aviation, because as much as we love aviation and it's awe-inspiring and all that it unlocks in the world for us and our imaginations go through enormous strain when we see these types of incidents. This poor soul now walking away, the trauma that is in his cellular system, anyone who goes through a crisis, it's absorbed into your system. So there's a huge amount of healing that needs to be done with this poor man over and above the wounds that we're seeing on the screen.
And Anita, we're also hearing reports that his brother was on the same flight but wasn't sat with him. And we can only guess his fate. And it's just incredible to believe now that families in the UK will be looking at this and thinking, is there the prospect of a further miracle? Could there yet be further survivors?
And you've hit a very critical aspect of this. The hope is still there. This gentleman gives us hope. And it might have been seat 11A where the miracle walked away, but were there other seats as well? And it's so important to keep that hope alive, but we keep the hope alive with facts and making sure that speculation is put on hold, but we work with the facts of what we know, what we can understand to be true, and especially when it comes to the investigation, what do we need to learn so we never have this situation being faced by any airline, any manufacturer, any country, and any passenger again in the history of aviation.
Wise words, and thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us today. I appreciate your time. Aviation expert Anita Mendirata, thank you. And plenty more to come next, including the domestic reaction to the India plane crash. Next, with our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, and we'll take a look at Boeing's perhaps checkered safety history. With me, Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
What do you think? Is there personal agendas being pushed in schools by maybe individual teachers, or perhaps it's the ethos of the entire school?
I don't think it's not widespread, but there are isolated incidents where, you know, you hear about teachers who have put too much of their own personal opinion into things. And it's actually in the Teaching Standards of England, Part 2, about your professional and personal conduct as well, and also the prevent duty. So I think it's not widespread, but we do hear of cases where teachers have been struck off for this behaviour.
So are there quite strict guidelines then, Christine, on what teachers can bring to the classroom? And would you know if a teacher is stepping outside of those boundaries?
Yeah, 100%. You, as a head teacher and as a senior management team, you need to look at the curriculum, what's being taught, and that how it's delivered within the classroom as well, because there are strict standards. And if a school is failing in that way, then it's not good at all.
Fahima, what might the issues be with this, do you think, from your point of view? If a teacher brings their own ideas about identity politics, let's say, or actually just politics in general, into the classroom, should they be allowed to do that?
To be honest, I don't think that teachers actually will bring their own politics into it. I think it's just their style of teaching, regardless of their opinion. I don't think they can rewrite history. It's only about expanding it. And good teaching presents multiple perspectives, especially in a diverse country like Britain. And it doesn't mean it's erasing sort of any sort of content or traditional. It just means that we're just, you know, adding different voices and critical thinking. That's the whole idea about education, is critical thinking and not blind agreement.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This Saturday, join GB News as we mark the King's official birthday. Trooping the Colour, hosted by Charlie Peters, Miriam Cates and me, Cameron Walker, live from Buckingham Palace from 10 a.m. this Saturday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 5. You're with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, I'm joined in the studio by GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster. And Catherine, a talking point that leapt out a short while ago I'd like to pick up again with you, and it's that the Tata Group, which is the majority stakeholder in Air India, has offered payments, 10 million rupee payments, that's around about £86,000, to impacted families of this disaster today. Now, a lot of people are saying that feels a bit premature. What's your take on that?
I think it does. I saw this a couple of hours ago and I felt quite shocked that this should be being offered now when relatives haven't even officially been told, you know, that their loved ones have been killed in this crash. But important, before I say what I'm about to say, that we do not know why this crash took place or who is liable. But worth saying, I think, that money has changed hands previously. Last month, Boeing paid $1.1 billion in a deal with the US Justice Department to avoid prosecution for the two 737 MAX planes, which crashed back in 2018 and back in 2019, killing 346 people between them. Now, Boeing grounded that fleet for a couple of years, near enough, lost huge amounts of money, relaunched those planes, but there has been continuing problems with them. January last year, we had a 737 MAX 9, the door plug blew off. There was another one, lost altitude last March. And although the 787 Dreamliner, this plane today, has never had a crash, there have been problems with engines. Last summer, there was a sudden drop in altitude over the Tasman Sea. 50 people were injured. And a whistleblower from Boeing last year, an engineer, said in Washington hearings that these planes should be grounded. Boeing said they were confident in the safety. So let us see what happens. Of course, we do not know the cause of this, but Boeing, were able to buy their way out of people being prosecuted, and the families of those crashes back in 2018 and 19 said that that was morally repugnant.
And you're exactly right to point out we do not know the cause of this crash, and one of the incredible facets of this particular case is that footage of the tailpiece simply poking out the side of a tower block, a residential block, is particularly pertinent. This footage here, because Catherine Forster, I've been speaking with aviation experts throughout the show, and they say typically the black recording box will be in that rearward section, so they'll be able to, they believe, ascertain relatively quickly what the cause of this particular crash was. And as I say, and as you said, we don't know yet, but it is worth pointing out this heritage of safety. And you're exactly right to point out that a former senior manager at Boeing, Ed Pearson, he said that there have been, in his words, when he was a senior manager with Boeing, too many faults with Boeing planes. He was a whistleblower who called for a criminal investigation to be opened into the beleaguered company because their planes are not safe. Now, that was just his view. And as I say, we don't know what the cause is here, but certainly, Catherine Forster, the notion of the Tata Group putting money forward straight away, I put it to an Indian journalist a short while ago. He said it felt a little bit untimely.
I think exactly that. And also, it is highly likely, isn't it, that any grieving relatives who ultimately do sign this deal, and of course, in India especially, if you are Indian, that is quite a lot of money. There is, I would imagine, likely to be terms and conditions attached to that money.
Incredible day. And just to repeat, if you're joining in the show, 290 is the latest figure from Indian police of those feared, believed to be dead. 242 passengers on board. We do know of the miracle in Ahmedabad. Survivor Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, a 40-year-old British national, simply walked away in footage which has astonished the world. There is the picture, perhaps the luckiest man on the planet. We'll have more on this breaking story throughout the rest of the hour. You with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. But for now, here's your weather.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. We've got heat, we've got humidity, and we've got some big downpours, and as a result, Met Office yellow warnings have been issued. We've already seen some pretty heavy rain around this area of low pressure across parts of the west today. That low pressure is wafting the air up from the south. That's why it's warm, that's why it's humid. Plenty of sunshine over eastern England and much of Scotland. But in Scotland in particular, that rain is marching northwards. Very heavy still through the afternoon across Northern Ireland, spreading into western Scotland, easing off a bit as it does so, but still some hefty downpours likely this evening, particularly over North Wales, northwest England and southwest Scotland. Even as it turns dry, it will stay warm and humid. The winds will be easing, but temperatures holding up in the mid-teens in most towns and cities. Now, Friday is another fine day for a good part of the country. Certainly sunny skies across much of northeast Scotland. It won't be as windy here as well. There won't be as much of that low cloud lapping onto the coast. Still pretty cloudy in Northern Ireland. Maybe not as persistent, the rain, as today, but some heavy downpours likely here, especially around the middle part of the day. We start largely dry across England and Wales, maybe 1 or 2 showers in West Wales, but they shouldn't be as intense, again, as the downpours have been today, at least at this stage. Most of us will have a fine, bright day tomorrow. Plenty of very warm, if not hot, sunshine, especially in the east. But further south, the storms are gathering once more. We'll see some hefty downpours returning to parts of the south coast by the end of the afternoon. Warm and humid for most places, and look at these numbers across eastern England with some sunshine getting up into the high 20s. The thundery showers then march northwards during Friday evening. The potential for some disruption as they affect parts of southern England, spread into Wales, and then drift northwards through the night into the Midlands and eventually into northern England. Still some of those heavy downpours around on Saturday. Met Office warnings are in place, so check those the Met Office website for full details.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. In Staffordshire, travellers on the A50 eastbound between the A522 and A518 Uttoxeter to East face congestion with delays until 8 this evening. Luton sees significant hold-ups on the M1 northbound between Junction 10 and Junction 11 due to a collision, causing a delay of up to 1 hour. For drivers on the A55, planned maintenance westbound at Junction 24, Fenall means the off-slip is closed, with diversions in place. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast and London North Western Railway report disruptions between Milton Keynes Central and Rugby. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
We're kick-starting summer with your chance to win our biggest cash prize to date, as there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? A brand new car, the holiday of a lifetime, or just sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? For a chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Our top story today as an Air India flight bound for London Gatwick crashed shortly after takeoff. And the Boeing 787 Dreamliner was engulfed in a massive fireball after plummeting into a building in the suburb of Ahmedabad in Western India. The local police have said over 200 bodies have been recovered from the site, including one survivor, who, according to reports, is believed to be British. A miracle in Ahmedabad. Throughout the show, we'll be bringing you all of the latest on this story. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. In other news, Northern Ireland's Police Chief John Butcher has warned the bigots and racists that have been behind 3 nights of disorder in the region that his officers will be coming after them. 3 teenagers have been charged with riot offences following a 3rd night of disorder. That disorder largely took place in Ballymena, but violence has spread to other towns, including Larne, where a leisure centre providing emergency shelter for relocated families was attacked and set on fire. Authorities have described it as racist thuggery targeted at ethnic minorities and police officers. One man is clearly seen throwing a machete towards security services. 32 officers were injured and 6 people arrested on the first 2 nights of violence. Deputy First Minister Emma Little-Pengley says the government is working to reassure the local community.
No woman or girl walking about should feel fearful. We've got our Ending Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, and of course we've got a number of schemes running. We're working with the PSNI, we're working with local councils to tackle the scourge of that misogyny, of that violence against women and girls. So we want to reassure everyone that we are working hard to try to ensure that everybody remains safe. But we are listening to those concerns. We must listen to those concerns, and we need to stamp out that violence against women and girls.
Chair of the Northern Ireland Policing Board, Mukesh Sharma, says it is absolutely race-based.
This violence is racism, pure and simple racism, with the police left to deal with the outworkings of societal unrest. It is truly a sad reflection of our society that people are putting identifiers on their front doors in the hope of escaping attack. The Chief Constable has assured us that the police will stand to protect and will bring those responsible to justice and will attempt to prevent where they can. But the real prevention work lies in the hands of others.
In other news, the Chancellor says she is disappointed after new figures show the UK economy shrank by 0.3% in April. The sharper than expected decline comes a day after Rachel Reeves promised to boost growth in her spending review. Her plans included an extra £29 billion a year for the NHS in England and boosts for defence, education and housing, although some departments will see their budget squeezed. Economists say tax rises will be almost inevitable in the autumn. Rachel Reeves, though, has defended her announcements.
You have to get the balance right between tax, spending and borrowing. If you said yes to every request for more money, you'd end up in the same position that Liz Truss ended up in, which is crashing the economy, sending mortgage rates spiralling and causing the cost of living crisis that's done so much damage.
Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride has accused Rachel Reeves of economic vandalism, saying taxpayers will foot the bill.
The answer is it's coming by way of far higher taxes, particularly on businesses, and that is destroying growth. It has also come by way of huge levels of additional borrowing, which has been inflationary, which has been interest rates have been higher for longer, our national debt growing, and the servicing costs of that debt, because of the higher interest rates, now running at £100 billion per year. That's twice what we spend on defence, and that's leaving us overall in a very fragile position with a lot of challenges ahead, and a lot of people worried now that we're going to be looking at potentially very significant further tax rises in the autumn.
The US is scaling back its embassy staff in Iraq as well as from military bases in the region over heightened security threats. It comes over fears of reprisals amid reports that Israel's preparing to attack Iran's nuclear program without US support. Diplomatic staff will leave Baghdad along with a partial withdrawal of staff from bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. It's been announced by US President Donald Trump, who said he was less confident now that negotiations with Iran would succeed. And the White House is reviewing a multi-billion-dollar submarine deal signed with the UK and Australia. Washington want to make sure it's aligned with President Trump's America First agenda. The AUKUS Pact would provide Australia with its first nuclear submarines and has been widely seen as a response to the threat of China. Australia's Defence Minister says he's confident the pact will proceed. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
Thank you, Tatiana. To our top story today, and over 50 British nationals are now feared dead after an Air India flight bound for London Gatwick crashed shortly after takeoff. But according to Indian media, a British national has survived the Air India plane crash, a miracle in Ahmedabad. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, as you can see on your screens, first picture of that British national survivor, said that he heard a loud noise around 30 seconds after takeoff before that plane went down. Now, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner was then engulfed in a massive fireball after plummeting into a building in the suburb of Ahmedabad in western India. Local police have now said over 200 bodies have been recovered from the site. And we can now speak with GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, what's the latest? The last I heard, we had 290 now feared dead, 53 British nationals on that flight, and yet that miracle story of the survivor, Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, simply seemed to walk away from this disaster. An incredible story.
Yeah, I mean, we've had no update on the casualty figure since last time we spoke, but clearly very significant with the number at 290, meaning that more than 50 others on the ground were also killed in this. We don't know the final tally of all 242 on board, whether all died. And this one young man, I say younger than me, but 40 years old, survived this and effectively walked away from this wreckage. We are showing you, just a reminder, these are distressing images, but they are the final moments of this aircraft taking off from the airport in Ahmedabad, headed for London Gatwick, and it becomes, apparent very quickly that something is wrong. The landing gear is still down. That's normally retracted about now, but it's still down, as this aircraft now at this point, about 20-30 seconds into the flight, is clearly going down quite rapidly there. The aircraft nose pointing up in the last moments before clearly it impacts the ground, and then immediately on that impact, this huge fireball into the sky. Very disturbing images, but we can confirm now that the one survivor, at the moment the sole survivor from this horrific tragedy, was Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, and according to NDTV, our colleagues there at that Indian rolling news channel, this is Vishwash Kumar Ramesh walking away. And just incredible if that is actually him there, as NDTV says. There's a bit of blood staining some soot marks on his T-shirt there, and he's certainly limping away. And being ushered towards an ambulance there. He was in seat 11A on this aircraft, near an emergency exit off the aircraft. Somehow, just at the moment of impact, he appears to have been thrown clear from that. He said, speaking to the Hindustan Times, that he was in India for a few days to visit his family and was going back to the UK along with his brother AJ, who was sitting a row or two away from Vishwash. Now, Vishwash Kumar Ramesh has said that he has not been able to trace his brother, and he's urgently and desperately appealing for any information about his 45-year-old brother. He was taken to the civil hospital as Arwa, the civil hospital there in Ahmedabad, and that's where that image of him clearly bruised and bloodied, that facial image of him sitting in his hospital bed, was captured by the Hindustan Times. An incredible image. He did suffer also, we're told, chest injuries, a leg injury, as well, as was evident, of course, by the fact that he was limping around there up towards the ambulance itself. Now, he said that 30 seconds after takeoff, there was a loud noise and then the plane crashed. It all happened so quickly. and as I say, he received those impact injuries, but just incredible that he was able to sort of walk away from this. He said as well, describing those dramatic seconds after being able to walk from that fireball, he said, when I got up, there were bodies all around me. I was scared. I stood up and ran. There were pieces of the plane all around me. Something grabbed hold of me, or someone grabbed hold of me, I should say, and pushed me in the direction of the ambulance that was brought there. And that took him to the local hospital. So this is a man, he's lived in London for the past 20 years, is a wife and 2 children in London as well, who will be mightily relieved, of course, knowing that that her husband, their father, has survived this. There he is in hospital, clearly distressed. Of course you would be after such an ordeal, but that's tempered by the fact that this man's brother is still missing. AJ Kumar Rumash, still missing at this hour, Martin.
And Mark White, just to try and make some sense of this, perhaps we can't make any sense of what looks to be nothing short of a miracle, but we have a seating plan, Mark White, of where Vishwash Kumar Ramesh would have been sat. And I think it's just fascinating to try and make sense of this. He was sat in seat 11A. I think we get that on our screens now. And for those of us who are used to travelling on flights, that's a front row seat of what I guess is like the economy section. And the key point, Mark White, it's one of those emergency exit seats. And somehow, perhaps we'll never understand, but somehow Vishwash Kumar Ramesh has got out of that emergency exit. We will never probably know how, and miraculously survived.
I can only imagine, Martin, that it must have been the impact that in that impact, just a forward momentum or something that thrust him out of the way. Because looking at that image there, you can see actually a row of seats in front of him. So not directly, I think, at the exit, because it's the seats in front, the darker grey coloured 3 rows of 3 seats that, you know, normally with an airline you pay a little bit extra for leg room just at the exit there. So he, by the looks of that, if that is 11A, is a seat behind, which wouldn't be then actually right at the exit, but certainly very near. But if you've got an aircraft that is effectively disintegrating around you, it seems to just be that, the most miraculous of happenstance that pushed him out of the aircraft with the way in which this aircraft was crumpling around him.
3 aviation experts so far during the show, and I'm about to speak to another one, and I'll ask them the same question. It's like everybody, we've always been led to believe, Mark White, if there's anywhere safe to sit on a plane when it impacts, it's towards the rear, because of course planes go down forwards and there's less impact at the back. But that didn't happen in this case, because the payload of the fuel would have been in the wings, and we saw that giant fireball. So somehow this seat that was in front of that has provided this miraculous chain reaction. And the more you think about it, Mark White, you just cannot make sense of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of cases, sitting towards the rear of the aircraft makes a bit of sense in terms of, you know, if the aircraft's coming down nose first, then clearly those further forward are going to be impacted most severely. But, you know, it's not a sort of one size fits all here. There are degrees in which, and no one can say just how an aircraft lands. And this aircraft, from what we could see in the final moments, as it looks like the pilots were trying to just stretch the glide, get that extra lift over the wings, had the nose tipping, pointing upwards. And in doing that, of course, that rear section then collided with an apartment block. That's why we see the very end section of the tail of the aircraft that is embedded in the apartment block itself. And then the rest of the aircraft careered in whatever forward motion it did to then come down and impact the ground properly. So yes, it's possible that potentially people that were sat right at the back there might have been thrown free somehow as well. But you know, there is instances, of course, where sitting in the back seems to be the safer option, but it is not always true. And clearly, this man, Vishwash, is absolutely a testament to that.
Starting to feel like the miracle man of Ahmedabad, Vishwash Kumar Ramesh. Mark White, thank you for bringing us up to speed. As ever, you've been superb throughout the day. Thank you very, very much. I'm now joined by an aviation analyst, Guy Leach. Guy, welcome to the show. You no doubt overheard us kind of mere mortals trying to make some sense of this. Perhaps we never can. But I'd like to try to see if I can get some sense from you to give us an idea of the physics here, the forward momentum, the mass of the flight, the payload of the fuel, the hundreds of tons that exploded with such gigantic force. 290 feared dead, we hear from the Indian police. How, amidst all of that, could somebody have survived?
Yeah, isn't it fascinating? And indeed, the word miracle is the word that comes to mind. My take on it, though, is that the Seat-11A was simply thrown clear of the wreckage as it actually broke up. I think that was the only way he survived the fireball. He had to have been away from it. Yeah, and that's probably how he picked up his facial injuries and maybe chest injuries as the seat was actually thrown out of the hull. I think that what is of note in this particular instance is that the Boeing 787 was the first of the modern jetliners, wide-body jetliners, to be built primarily out of composites. It's fuselage anyway. The Airbus A350s followed suit a bit later. And that would have meant it had a very different breakup structure in the way it actually broke up when it hit this building that seems to have been some sort of medical school. And that's, of course, why we've seen so many ground fatalities added to the total as well. But I think it's also interesting to your viewers to understand that, yes, indeed, the rear of the aircraft is still generally considered the safest, and that's why the so-called black boxes, which are actually orange, are still actually located in the back of the aircraft.
And we can see here, this is the footage of Air India Flight 171 taking off early this morning. And Guy, I'll talk us through this. I'd like you to try and ascertain what you believe happened here. You can see it's taking off there. The undercarriage hasn't been pulled up, and it seems this point where the flight would normally be accelerating and getting upward velocity and momentum and upthrust simply starts to plummet out of the sky. The nose seems to go up. Is that the pilot struggling to try and get upward trajectory, and yet tragically just plummets to the earth? And here we can see now, upon impact, just that gigantic fireball engulfing the apartment blocks and, of course, the entire fuselage. Guy Leach, having looked at that as an aviation analyst, what do you think is the most likely cause of this Flight 171 going down?
You know, it's way too early to speculate, and that's why we're all hoping to see the data from both the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder. There is some of the observers who've managed to look at those videos more critically have suggested that the flaps were retracted, and the flaps lower the stalling speed. So it's possible, but this remains, you know, only in the basis of observation of quite low-resolution videos, that the flaps were retracted early, and that the aircraft was therefore not able to sustain its climb rate. And that's why we see it gradually subsiding into the ground. But as I said, I'm afraid that remains a realm of pure speculation. I need to point out that, you know, other people say, well, perhaps it was a bird strike. That would be unlikely, because even if one of the engines had failed totally, it would have still been able to climb away at full weight. It was at maximum gross weight. From that particular incident, these aircraft are designed with an enormous surplus of power, so they're able to do that. So I'm not really blaming the aircraft or the engines at this stage. Of course, it has had a massive impact on Boeing. The shares, the stocks and shares melted down by a full 8% on the news of this crash, and obviously it's another double blow or whammy after the troubles of the Boeing 737 MAX. But I think that it's useful to remember that the Boeing Dreamliner, the 787 Dreamliner, has so far had an impeccable record, and that's over almost 15 years of operations. So I don't think that this one is going to be easy to blame on the actual aircraft, and I'm not seeing much response from the other airliners who operate 787s in terms of any desire or attempt to want to ground the aircraft in response to this accident.
OK, thank you for joining us. That's the aviation analyst, Guy Leach. And, of course, one of the extraordinary aspects of this particular impact is that tail section we've seen poking out of that residential block. That, we're told, is where the black box, which is actually orange, will be located. So that could be... There it is. We can see there the rearward section there will be containing the black box where all that information will be stored, and I've been told by experts throughout the show today that could be quickly retrieved, analysed, and we should know information pretty soon. Compared to a crash where the fuselage will be over a huge area, seems relatively straightforward, I've been told today. Thanks for joining us. That's Guy Leach. Now, we'll bring you all the very latest on the plane crash next, including the political reaction. I'll be joined by Chris Hope, our political editor. Stay with us.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:25 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. I'm joined in the studio for some political reaction today to this Air India Flight 171, the tragedy going down. Chris, there's been an outpouring of sympathy, as you'd expect, but also some firm action from the British government. Brings up to speed.
That's right. So the Foreign Office, we are told by the government, is now in crisis mode to support the families. Not surprising. You've got the loss of maybe 50 British lives in this crash. We don't have a figure yet. Number 10 say that we should prepare as a country for significant loss of life, Martin. This is deeply distressing for families, obviously. So Keir Starmer has sent his condolences to Premier Narendra Modi. The British High Commissioner in Delhi has been scrambled to Ahmedabad to support the families of those involved in the crash. There's no reports on what we report, no comment on what we're reporting that a British man or a man has survived the crash, but there's more of that on GB News, of course. And the situation is evolving. Now, that's what the Foreign Office and the government is saying. Separate to that, the Department for Transport is sending a team of 4 accident investigators, air accident investigators. Part of a bilateral deal with India, we agreed to go and support them in their investigations to find out quickly. And there is a real urgency now because we heard from your expert moments ago, if it's not a bird strike, if it's not a kind of something else acting on the aircraft, why did the aircraft come down? And the cause must be identified very quickly, given the number of flights taking off around the globe. Keir Starmer, we've heard of him already. He says he's been kept updated as the situation developed and his thoughts with friends and family. It may be that he may be recording a clip later on. We'll wait and see if there is. We'll bring it to you. There's rumours earlier, not confirmed yet, or maybe a meeting of ministers in the Cabinet Office in the so-called Cobra Room. Again, not confirmed. We'll wait and see if that happens. There's no suggestion of any nefarious activity. This is an appalling accident, deeply tragic, and really, really very, very sad. And I think the government is moving into behind those families.
Yeah, thank you very much there for that reaction, Chris Hope. Pleasure, thank you. Move on to my next guest now. I'm joined by the former presenter at New Delhi TV, Bhairavi Singh. Welcome to the show, Ms Singh. It's a pleasure to have your company on what is a tragic day for India and, of course, tragic day for those 53 British citizens on board. We've just seen some astonishing footage on Indian television of the aftermath, of the impact and, of course, of what we're just calling the miracle man. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, who simply walked away from that, and we've got live pictures. Well, this is a takeoff from earlier on. Ms Singh, you can see here just talking through the flight taking off. The undercarriage did not go up as would normally be expected. We've heard from aviation experts throughout the show, and the flight then struggles to get upward trajectory. We all knew this is distressing footage of the plane now struggling and failing to get upward trajectory. Perhaps there was a failure of equipment. We don't know yet. And you can see now Bhairavi Singh, the flight 171 plummeting towards the ground, and in a moment's time it erupts into that huge fireball which claimed the lives, we now believe, of 290 on the ground. How is this news being received in India?
Well, obviously a very tragic day for civil aviation here in India and for all of us here. So many lives have been lost. A large number of those on board were Indians, but also, as you pointed out, about 50 odd of them were UK nationals. Ramesh Vishwakumar has had a miraculous escape from that flight. We know that he was on the emergency seat. Just a short while ago, the Union Home Minister has said that he's met the lone survivor, and of course more details of that will be coming out. At this moment, it's too early to say whether this was human error, a technical error, or, merely a bird hit. But from as your guests were pointing out, that the videos that have emerged from that flight clearly indicate that the landing gear was still out, still down. The plane was in rapid descent. and the pilots were fighting to gain altitude. And shortly after takeoff, within 32 to 50 seconds of that takeoff, the flight actually, it fell on that medical college hostel building, which is why 5 students we know have also died who were having lunch at that time at the hostel building. And the scale of this tragedy was so much, as you would know, that if there's a flight that's on an international route, it had a full tank of fuel. There was so much smoke at that moment that the Indian Army columns had to be called in for rescue operations. At the moment, what we know is that a joint control room has been set up. A relief flights for the families of the victims have been put in place. The Tata Group that owns Air India has announced 1 crore relief compensation for the families, which is about £86,000 per family. On the investigation side, I'd like to point out that the U.S. National Transport Safety Board is sending a team, and Boeing has also been asked to send a team of experts. Of course, putting questions on what happens next for Boeing as well, which has been in the spotlight for multiple accidents in the recent past. Obviously, at the moment, too early to point fingers on who's responsible, but Boeing shares did fall on the news, and Boeing has responded to the Indian government saying that they will be closely monitoring the situation and also collaborating with the Indian government for the investigation going forward. That's what we know at the moment on the investigation side. The Civil Aviation Ministry has set up a joint operation control room that is also in close contact with authorities in London, is what we know at this point.
Ms. Singh, can I ask you about the Tata Group, of course, the majority shareholder of Air India, this compensation package, 10 million rupees per family. It's around about £86,000 in sterling for those families impacted. A few people have been saying this feels a bit premature. Is it the right thing to do to be, throwing money around so soon after a tragedy like this?
Well, the Tatas have been known to be a very responsible group here in India, and obviously this is a huge embarrassment for them as well. As I keep pointing out, too early to say what really happened, but if this was an error on the part of the airlines, the airline team, this flight was coming from Delhi. It was going from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick. So whether there was an error, from the technical team side, or any human error on the side of the airlines, they're just, being careful about this at the moment. And of course, in the recent decade or so, we haven't seen this kind of the scale of a tragedy happening in India, in the airlines in India. This is a very busy. India is very busy as far as airlines is concerned, and Tata Group owns a massive chunk of the airlines. I mean, they're predominantly the biggest shareholders when it comes to airlines. So they're taking responsibility, initial responsibility, saying that we will take care of, the victims of the families. And of course, the black box will throw more light on what exactly happened. And if there is a mistake from the airline, there will be course correction.
Thank you. We have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us. That's the foreign presenter at New Delhi TV by Ravi Singh. Thanks for your time. I've plenty more to come throughout the rest of the show. But for now, if you're travelling home from work or from school, please stay safe. And here is your traffic and your travel update. And please stick with us.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. In Luton, a traffic accident on the M1 northbound between junctions 10 and 11 closed 2 lanes, causing hour-long delays. On the A55 westbound at junction 24 Fayenol, maintenance continues with diversions. Manchester's M60 anti-clockwise is congested with 10-minute delays. M69 northbound from junction 1 to the M1 in Leicestershire faces 20-minute delays. Staffordshire's A50 eastbound should improve soon. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast services are disrupted between Milton Keynes Central and Rugby, while Greater Anglia faces disturbances. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. We've got heat, we've got humidity, and we've got some big downpours, and as a result, Met Office yellow warnings have been issued. We've already seen some pretty heavy rain around this area of low pressure across parts of the west today. That low pressure is wafting the air up from the south. That's why it's warm, that's why it's humid. Plenty of sunshine over eastern England and much of Scotland. But in Scotland in particular, that rain is marching northwards. Very heavy still through the afternoon across Northern Ireland, spreading into western Scotland, easing off a bit as it does so, but still some hefty downpours likely this evening, particularly over North Wales, northwest England and southwest Scotland. Even as it turns dry, it will stay warm and humid. The winds will be easing, but temperatures holding up in the mid-teens in most towns and cities. Now, Friday is another fine day for a good part of the country. Certainly sunny skies across much of northeast Scotland. It won't be as windy here as well. There won't be as much of that low cloud lapping onto the coast. Still pretty cloudy in Northern Ireland. Maybe not as persistent, the rain, as today, but some heavy downpours likely here, especially around the middle part of the day. We start largely dry across England and Wales, maybe one or two showers in West Wales, but they shouldn't be as intense, again, as the downpours have been today, at least at this stage. Most of us will have a fine, bright day tomorrow. Plenty of very warm, if not hot sunshine, especially in the east, but further south, the storms are gathering once more. We'll see some hefty downpours returning to parts of the south coast by the end of the afternoon. Warm and humid for most places, and look at these numbers across eastern England with some sunshine getting up into the high 20s. The thundery showers then march northwards during Friday evening. The potential for some disruption as they affect parts of southern England, spread into Wales, and then drift northwards through the night into the Midlands and eventually into northern England. Still some of those heavy downpours around on Saturday. Met Office warnings are in place, so check those the Met Office website for full details.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. It is 5:38, and I'm joined now by the aerospace engineer Ella Atkins to try and make sense of why India Air Flight 171 went down. Ella, welcome to the show. I'm going to put footage on now of that takeoff on our screen. Just to warn viewers, there is some distressing footage. Ella, as we see this footage, can you try and talk me what you think happened with this flight here? You can see it's coming into view now. Talk us through what you think happened.
So it looks like the takeoff roll and the initial climb was normal. There was no reason to believe that the pilots believed there was any problem until a few seconds after takeoff. One of the things to note is if you look closely, it looks like the landing gear stays down. Normally, a pilot will retract the landing gear very shortly after they take off because that reduces drag and helps their climb. Now, at this point, you see they're starting to descend again. So by this time, landing gear is still down. They are not supposed to be doing this. They're not supposed to be descending. My understanding is that there was a mayday call by the pilot to air traffic control soon after that highest altitude was reached that said the pilot said no thrust, plane not taking lift, which suggests that both engines had either failed, had bad fuel, or something caused them to shut off. Not clear what.
So we've heard theories of it's maybe an issue with the flaps. not giving upward trajectory, and we had an earlier expert saying it could be a hydraulic failure, which would prevent the landing gear from going up and the flaps from being deployed down to give that upward thrust. But you're suggesting this could be a lack of momentum. It could be an engine failure. It's simply too slow to achieve that upward thrust.
Well, these planes can fly on one engine. They are designed specifically in case there is a single engine failure during takeoff to be able to still climb and continue around and do an emergency landing with one engine. That did not happen here. And the notion of no thrust, which the pilot reported in his Mayday call, suggests that both engines were not generating thrust. Typically, you need at least one. If there's no thrust, then the plane is going to descend. It has a full load of fuel, pretty close to full load of passengers. There's no way that it's going to continue at altitude or in a climb if both engines had either failed, the fuel was bad, or something else happened to make them shut down.
And Anna Atkins, Air India Flight 171, this tragedy today is the first time that this particular type of Boeing, the 787, has been involved in a fatal crash. But there have been instances before of engine cutting out over the Tasman Sea. Didn't result in tragedy that time. There were some injuries. From your perspective, if that were to be the case, and of course the black box upon retrieval will tell us a lot more, if there were to be a twin engine failure at the same time, how unusual, how rare is that?
It's extremely rare. Usually, if both engines fail, there is some extreme atmospheric event, like really heavy precipitation that gets into the engine. Looks like the weather was good there, so that is extremely unlikely that the atmosphere caused the engines to fail. There could be fuel contamination. Why both engines would fail at the same time with fuel contamination is an open question. Once you get past those, the black box data is really important because it is almost zero probability that both engines would fail due to mechanical failure conditions at the same time. They have independent electronics. They should be able to run one at a time, and there was no fire, suggesting that there was no fuel explosion or anything like that that caused this problem.
So, Anna Atkins, just piecing this together forensically, as you just did for us there, the Mayday call, which suggested a lack of thrust, the upward trajectory suddenly just failing, and we saw that the flight went down. Your most likely working thesis is one of twin engine failure and a simple incapacity, inability to thrust upwards.
Yes, and I think the main questions here are, did the crew enter some inappropriate input? An inappropriate input could have had a flight plan that shut down thrust at the wrong time. That seems unlikely. The crew seemed well trained. They were on top of things, straight flight path, nominal takeoff. The other possibility is that something was wrong with the electronics, which is, I think, why Boeing is paying very close attention. Now, just to point out, the 787 has not previously crashed. So this would be something that we have not seen before, despite the fact that the aircraft is proven and has been safe. So please do not interpret what I'm saying as there was some failure of another Boeing aircraft. We have to look at the data and see what happened. Fuel contamination could have caused both engines to fail simultaneously because it takes some time from when you throttle up for the new fuel that would have been put in the tanks to actually get into the engine circulating through them. And there might have been some delay between when that contaminated fuel got into the engines and when they actually failed. And it would be possible for them to fail at the same time with that scenario. So there's several different things that could have happened, but from what you see in the flight path and what the Mayday call was contained from the crew, it does seem like a loss of thrust situation happened, in which case the aircraft could not remain in the air. It descended, and it looked like it descended as smoothly as the crew could have made it descend, because it did not appear to stall and then suddenly fall.
And Anna Atkins, reputationally, of course, for Boeing, this is a disaster. The share price initially plummeted about 9%. I think it's recovered slightly. But, of course, there is heritage here. Boeing recently, well, about a month ago, paid around $1 billion, a deal with the US Department of Justice to avoid prosecution over crashes involving not this aircraft type, but a 737 MAX plane that killed 346 people in Ethiopia in 2018 and another crash in Indonesia in 2019. There's been a tumultuous period for Boeing in recent times. There have been multiple reports of safety of fuselages blowing out. This is, of course, the airline, the company that Donald Trump has thrown his full weight behind. For Boeing, this is a PR disaster.
Well, certainly that's the case. Anytime a major aircraft crashes, the first and foremost concern is for the passengers who passed away and their families. But certainly if you look into the politics and the financial side of this, another Boeing crash looks terrible for both the company and government support of that company. Now, I still want to stress that the 787 has an extremely strong safety record. This is the first crash, as you mentioned at the beginning of this correspondence. And right now, we do not have sufficient information to conclude with confidence that Boeing was at fault. I think we need to look at the black box data. We need to look at the pilot inputs. We need to look at what the instruments said on the aircraft, what the engine status information was. Note that the engines are not manufactured by Boeing. They are manufactured by a third party. And so we need to look at all of that data together and determine what happened. On site, the forensics analysis will include examining the fuel as well.
OK, thank you for your expertise. Pleasure to have your company. That's the aerospace engineer, Ella Atkins. Thank you for joining us on GB News. Now, coming up, we'll be on the ground at the airport. The Air India flight was due to land at full reaction. We'll be at Gatwick Airport with Adam Cherry. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It's been a long old time now. Other missing cases. How do we prioritise that, despite, obviously, you know, Madeleine McCann being one of the most high-profile mysteries of my lifetime, for sure. I think if you... And again, I think you're right to point out, though, that if there is even the remotest of chances that... because sometimes an individual case can symbolise and mean something more in the public consciousness than in isolation. And I think this is such a case. It's something that I think people still deeply care about. So if there's any remote chance, I think they've got to go for it.
Well, let's hope something is found. These searches, as we know, are going to continue until Friday, unless, of course, fresh evidence is found, in which case they will continue.
I take it all sort of quite personally, because we holidayed in the area. I had children the same age at the time, and there used to be posters in the airport, you know, asking, have you seen this girl, and whatever. And my kids were very aware of it, you know, and you'd point out and talk about it and whatever. So I often think it could have been as easily one of my children involved in all of this, and you do take it personally.
And I think a lot of people in the country would feel that way. It's in the nation's psyche, isn't it, Madeleine McCann?
Yeah.
We all know her, we know her face, we feel as though we know her as a little girl. I think everybody would like to have answers as to what happened to her.
Right, OK, so the Portuguese police are saying about this, the search warrant was issued by the Public Prosecutor's Office in Germany, which is conducting preliminary proceedings against a German citizen suspected of the murder of a British citizen, Madeleine Beth McCann.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This Saturday, join GB News as we mark the King's official birthday. Trooping the Colour, hosted by Charlie Peters, Miriam Cates and me, Cameron Walker, live from Buckingham Palace from 10 a.m. this Saturday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. In the last few minutes, President Donald Trump has commented on the Air India disaster, saying it's one of the worst in aviation history.
The plane crash was terrible. I've already told them anything we can do. And it's a big country, a strong country, and they'll handle it, I'm sure. But I let them know that anything we can do, we'll be over there immediately. But it was a horrific crash. It looks like most are gone. They actually maybe have a couple survivors, which is just heard. But that was a horrible crash. Nobody knows. Nobody has any idea what it might be. I gave him a couple of pointers. I said, maybe you'll look at this or that. You know, we saw the plane. It looked like it was flying pretty well. It didn't look like there was an explosion. It just looked like the engines maybe lost power. But boy, that is a terrible crash. It's one of the worst in aviation history. Yeah, second.
That's Donald Trump there. And let's now speak with GB News reporter Adam Cherry, who's at Gatwick Airport. Of course, the airport where that Air India flight was due to land around about 6 p.m. this evening. So any moment now, let's go to Adam Cherry. Adam Cherry, 53 British passengers on that flight. We now know the miracle man of Ahmedabad, Vishwan Kumar Ramesh, survived, but the others, of course, did not.
That's right, Martin. Yes, and I'll just bring you a little bit of an update on what's happening here at Gatwick. So Air India have closed the check-in desk here. No more flights from Air India taking off. There was supposed to be one departing for Goa. That has now been cancelled. Just bring you a statement from the chief executive of Gatwick Airport. This is Stuart Wingate, and he said that London Gatwick is liaising closely with Air India, and a reception centre for relatives of those on board is being set up, where information and support will be provided. And the airport usually has around 12 weekly flights from Air India departing from Gatwick here. And we've also heard from the chief executive of Air India, Campbell Wilson, and he said, "I would like to express our deep sorrow about this event. This is a difficult day for all of us at Air India, and our efforts now are focused entirely on the needs of our passengers, crew members, their families and loved ones."
Jerry, of course, there would have been jubilant relatives there at Gatwick awaiting for that flight to land, and now that tragically will not be the case.
Yeah, that flight was due to land at about 6:25, so less than an hour now. It would have been landing on the tarmac here, and instead there's an enormous press pack beside me covering the tragedy of this. It is extraordinary. And there's still so much we don't know, but of course everyone here arriving, it's still an fully operational airport with the exception of the Air India closure. So these flights are still taking off. It's strange in a way given what's happened, but life is still going on here in some respects. But those arriving here are aware of the weight of what's happened, and obviously some are very trepidatious given that in the last 12 to 18 months there seems to be a pattern of these incidents, unfortunately.
Adam Cherry there from Gatwick Airport. Astonishing to believe that flight would have been landing in about 20 minutes' time. Thank you, Adam Cherry. So coming up next, it is Jubes & Co. trying to make sense of the disaster of Flight 171. Jubes & Co. is up next.
Thanks for that, Martin. Fantastic show. Horrendous situation, of course, with that plane crash. Coming up on the programme tonight, we've got so much that we need to discuss. Council tax. I thought it was not going to raise by a penny more, according to Labour. Well, it is 5% pretty much every year for the next 3. Also, the Tories have reported Reform UK to the ICO, getting them to look into all of their Doge efforts. I've got Aaron Bastani, Lord Moylan, in a couple of minutes.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. We've got heat, we've got humidity, and we've got some big downpours, and as a result, Met Office yellow warnings have been issued. We've already seen some pretty heavy rain around this area of low pressure across parts of the west today. That low pressure is wafting the air up from the south. That's why it's warm, that's why it's humid. Plenty of sunshine over eastern England and much of Scotland, but in Scotland in particular, that rain is marching northwards. Very heavy still through the afternoon across Northern Ireland, spreading into western Scotland, easing off a bit as it does so, but still some hefty downpours likely this evening, particularly over North Wales, northwest England and southwest Scotland. Even as it turns dry, it will stay warm and humid. The winds will be easing, but temperatures holding up in the mid-teens in most towns and cities. Now, Friday is another fine day for a good part of the country. Certainly sunny skies across much of northeast Scotland. It won't be as windy here as well. There won't be as much of that low cloud lapping onto the coast. Still pretty cloudy in Northern Ireland. Maybe not as persistent, the rain, as today, but some heavy downpours likely here, especially around the middle part of the day. We start largely dry across England and Wales, maybe one or two showers in West Wales, but they shouldn't be as intense, again, as the downpours have been today, at least at this stage. Most of us will have a fine, bright day tomorrow. Plenty of very warm, if not hot sunshine, especially in the east, but further south, the storms are gathering once more. We'll see some hefty downpours returning to parts of the south coast by the end of the afternoon. Warm and humid for most places, and look at these numbers across eastern England with some sunshine getting up into the high 20s. The thundery showers then march northwards during Friday evening. The potential for some disruption as they affect parts of southern England, spread into Wales and then drift northwards through the night into the Midlands and eventually into northern England. Still some of those heavy downpours around on Saturday. Met Office warnings are in place, so check those the Met Office website for full details.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.